Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast of the Storm, where socially awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all-around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the Nerdy Occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Evening, folks.
Hopefully our second co-host, the primordial source of evil in comics, Corrupt, will finally show up after being on a very long hiatus. Not holding out hope, though. And I am your host, / time I want to be, the Brainstormer of Pop Culture. How is everyone doing today?
I am okay.
As someone who's been stuck in quote-unquote quarantine for the last 2 weeks, I hope all of you are fine and dandy, and you actually get to go outside and not go and I honestly think I'm going crazy. Granted, I believed I was insane before, so nothing's really changed.
Do keep in mind that if you need somebody to talk to throughout the week to avoid going insane for the sake of social interaction, you do have my number, so there's that.
That's okay. I talk to myself mostly. I found myself to be a great conversationalist.
I'm just going to point out that that's probably not entirely healthy. Granted, I do it too, but probably not entirely healthy, and we're gonna move on.
Yeah. So a little different thing we're doing today, or this week, is last week we didn't really get to cover a lot because
between the stupidity of Leon Thomas of Renegade Cut and the stupidity of Marvel basically committing seppuku with the New Warriors, or the new Warriors, as the 10th Doctor might say. Yeah, we didn't really get to cover much.
Yeah.
But it made this week really easy, so yay.
Yeah, so we're going to cover a couple articles from last week. Then we're going to revisit the video of Renegade Cut that we covered last week. We are going to cover the second half of it, so if you want to watch the
reaction to the first 6.5 minutes of that video, it's in last week's episode, which would have been Podcast of the Storm number 55.
Yeah. And I have updated the playlist for episodes, so if you want to check that out, go there.
Also, the playlist is on my channel as well for anyone that's interested in viewing it that way.
Yep. I think that's all the updates. So let's get on. Also, I had to cut one article, which was the Hunt article.
Yeah, it was just too long, unfortunately, and there wasn't really as much worth covering in it.
Yeah. So we're going to cover 3 articles, and then we'll get to the video. And if we still have time after that, doubtful. Maybe we'll do a little chill and hang with you guys for like an hour or something.
Maybe. Anyway, get on with it.
Give us one moment, folks, while the article is loading, because I have a 2009 computer in 2020. So
2009. I didn't realize your computer was that old. Fucking hell.
I've told you that, didn't I?
I don't think you did. Or if you did, I did not retain that information.
Yeah, no, I have a very old computer. It's a hand-me-down, but it works.
The
Plus,
fact that
newer.
it still works, given that it was made in 2009, is frankly miraculous.
It's Apple, so it's a Mac.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, when you actually made stuff to last.
Unfortunately, I don't think that you'd have to go back further to get to the era where things were made to last.
Fair point. Okay, it is loading. Let me screen share this bastard.
And in we go.
So the first one is from Den of Geek. Motherland, Fort Salem is Witchy Empowerment by Alec Bojalid. If I'm saying the name wrong, I'm sorry. This was published March 13th, 2020. It is March 29th, 2020.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Donut sent me this article, and I kind of assume why.
Yeah, because I am a practicing occultist, and this feminist co-opting of occultism for their own ends, basically using the archetype of the witch as a political tool, fucking pisses me off, especially because it's pig ignorant of how things actually work within the context of magic and
We
occultism.
we have covered Fort Salem like once before when we like talked about the trailer.
Yeah, we reacted to the trailer once a while ago when Corrupt was actually on, surprisingly.
Yeah, I think that might have been one of his first appearances on this show.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, if I remember correctly, I was indifferent, or like I just didn't care.
And I was pissed off for the aforementioned reasons of stop using magic as a political tool, goddammit.
Right. Okay. Sorry, folks. I have like, for the record, don't take naps and like wake up 2 hours before you're supposed to start streaming.
It is not advisable, agreed.
Yeah. Okay. Motherland, Fort Salem covers many women-centric themes from America's past, present, and future. This it's a subheader. Moving forward. Okay. Once a term used to describe a literal search for and subsequent. Wait. Okay. I totally missed the first sentence. Okay. Witch hunts have become an enduring concept in our cultural lexicon. Once a term used to describe a literal search for and subsequent execution of suspected witches, the words have now evolved into a meaningless euphemism for political leaders, usually men, who feel persecuted by simple oversight or observation.
Okay. And already, first sentence in, and we already are at a mistake. The word witch does not just go back to the Middle Ages, when witch was considered a bad thing to be. The word witch comes from the Anglo-Saxon word wisa, which essentially meant craft of the wise or wise craft. In the same way that the word wizard comes from the Latin wizen, which essentially means wise one or wise man. The word witch well predates the conversion of the Roman Empire to Christianity, and therefore the forced conversion of the pre-Christian Celts to witchcraft. The word witch usually applied to sort of the village shaman, usually a female one. The village wise woman and healer who was learned in the arts of magic, herbal healing, astrology, medicine, etc., or at least what passed for it several thousand years ago. It only became a derogatory term once the Romans converted to Christianity, and being Christians now felt the need to convert everyone else to their religion, which is not something that Rome really did much of prior to the Christian conversion, because most of the time, at worst, what Romans would do is they would add their gods to whatever pre-existing pantheon existed, i.e., Romans didn't really have a problem with you believing in your own gods as long as you made space for theirs. In particular, the emperor, because the emperor, for political reasons, was viewed as a god. Regardless, even during the Middle Ages, the split of gender, in terms of who was accused of witchcraft, was actually fairly even. It was about 60-40 for most countries during what are referred to as the Burning Times, which is the time of all the witch trials. And incidentally, and I know I've made this point before, but in terms of what's the fucking word? In terms of the history of words, in terms of the not epistemology, but etymology of the word warlock. The word warlock comes from an Anglo-Saxon word meaning traitor. The word witch, as we just covered, comes from an Anglo-Saxon word which means wise. And if you want to know why that bugs me, it's because when women allegedly made a deal with the devil, according to the Christian mythos, it was because they were tricked or manipulated or bullied into making that deal with the devil, i.e., she's just a woman, she didn't know any better. Whereas when men allegedly made a deal with the devil, he was perfectly liable for every choice he made under that system, no matter how much he was tricked. That's why men who allegedly committed the crime of witchcraft were viewed as traitors, and women who allegedly committed the crime of witchcraft could at the very least still be called wise. I would keep on saying etymology, but I don't think it's the right word. But yeah, in terms of the history of the word witch and in terms of the history of the word warlock, women are still considered more blameless than the men who allegedly committed the crime. But do go on with your bullshit female empowerment message that is completely pig ignorant of the history of the term you're using and the practices there involved.
Okay. Witch hunt has lost some of its rhetorical power. That's why free-formed modern military witch drama, Fort Motherland, Fort Salem, is coming along at a useful moment in our history. You see, these witches hunt back. Motherland is set in an alternative version of the United States where the witches of colonial-era Salem cut a deal with the U.S. government to avoid the whole witch hunt ordeal by agreeing to join the burgeoning country's armed forces. That deal, known as the Salem Accord, persists to the present day, with three young witches, Rayla Collar, Abigail Bellwether, and Tally Cavern, find themselves enlisted in the Fort Salem military training facility on their 18th birthday, aka Conscription Day.
Okay, so question. What definition of the word witch are we going by here? Because this is very important for the sake of the world building. Because there are two majorly substantive definitions of the word witch. The pre-Christian or pre-Abrahamic definition is the one I just outlined. The village wise woman who practiced what's in the industry referred to as low magic or natural magic, or what could also be referred to as shamanic magic. The other definition, which became popular during the Middle Ages, was someone who made a pact with a demon for the sake of magical knowledge and or power. So if we're talking the literal witches of Salem, if they are the kind of witches that would have been acknowledged in the Middle Ages, i.e. the ones that made a deal with a literal demon, this is semi-unethical for similar reasons as I don't think it's particularly helpful for the witches from the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina to be the medieval definition of witches, because you're basically conflating anything that's not Christian in that case with Satanism. And speaking as a practicing occultist who has been practicing for almost 14 years now at this point, I'm somewhat perturbed by this, don't you know? But point being, nobody bothered to ask these kind of questions, did they? Because you're all so busy trying to say something that you will fall flat on your face trying desperately to say it and not actually effectively say it because you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You can't just play with these concepts willy-nilly and act like you know what you're talking about or you're making a substantive point unless you actually bother to define your terms and also know the history of the thing you're talking about, even in hypotheticals. Moving on.
Well, the world of Motherland may be unusually big and complex for a show aimed at young people. That sounds very condescending, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think that's his intention, but still.
like again, not to toot our own horn here, but as kids of the late 90s and early 2000s, the best shows during that time were shows that treated their child audiences a little bit more like adults, the ones that the ones that trusted kids with things like complex world building and lore. And you want to know what else? The shows that stuck with people that they kept even when they became adults are those shows with complex world building. That is how you make nerds. You give people something that they can care about with complex world building, and then because they care about the material, they also care about the complex world building. And in cases of people like me, the world building is actually what draws us in to the point that we care about the characters. Some people actually care more about the world building than the characters, and then it's because the world building is so fucking awesome that we grow to like the characters. Obviously, I know Brainstormer is a bit different because he has a switch in his brain that lights up every time someone even says the word character. But point being,
I knew that was coming. Um, I'm also just trying to think of like shows that are aimed at kids, but like treat the kids with a lot of respect and like intelligence. As like an example to counteract this.
I mean, basically any action cartoon of the late 90s and early 2000s
Well,
qualifies.
I was thinking like a live action. I'm thinking like a sitcom or something.
Like, I mean,
Boy Meets World.
huh?
Boy Meets World.
Does that have a lot of world building? I wouldn't imagine that would have a lot of like complex world building or stuff like that.
Well, it just didn't treat its audience like children.
True, I guess, and the same is true of stuff like Degrassi. Although I could see them counter arguing and say that shows like that are targeted primarily at teens, not necessarily kids.
Okay, that's fair.
Which is why I was going more of the, you know, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Ben 10, Generator Rex.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with that. Yeah, okay.
Even like Codename Kids Next Door had quite a lot of like world building and stuff in it that people cared about, to the point that people are still wanting a continuation of that. But
I just
even today, like shows like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is basically, I think, what in a best case scenario, what this is trying to be, what Motherland Fort Salem wishes it were, is still probably primarily popular with kids in the rough age range of the main characters, which is like 13 to 16 ish.
I just thought of like two shows.
Mm-hmm.
Well, three, but they all come from like the same company.
Mm-hmm.
Reboot, like the original one, not the reboot of Reboot.
Which totally isn't confusing in a meta sort of way.
Yeah. Yeah. So Reboots, Shadow Raiders, and Beast Wars, all coming from the same.
Or hell, like what's that one show from Nickelodeon? The live action show, House of Anubis. That whole show was based around like mysteries and mysticism and that sort of thing, and that was for a little while that was Nickelodeon's top show. And as much as I know I'm gonna not make any friends with my next example, but during the short-lived time when live action shows were on Cartoon Network, there was a show called Unnatural History, and despite the fact that it might have been misplaced on the network it was on, it was really, really good and dealt mostly with like old folklore, old conspiracy theories, old legends, that sort of thing. And it was awesome. And only lasted one season because people are dicks.
Mm-hmm. Um, shall we move on or
We shall.
okay? The series trusts its youthful audience and makes sure the themes therein are just as formidable. Like,
By basically inculcating them into a ridiculous propagandistic world where feminism is the one true moral path. That's kind of pathetic, to be honest with you.
I mean, to be fair, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, like, if you're writing a story, granted, when I like do scripts for my videos and stuff, I do always put a theme in there, but that's more of just to help me like write the characters and story itself.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, what a person, like an individual, takes from the story that you give them, that's on them.
Yeah.
Which is why, like, for the book, I'm like for the story, some of the stories I'm writing, I'm not really writing themes for it. I'm just trying to write it out. There are
Yeah,
themes in it.
you're letting the chips fall where they may, essentially.
Yep. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do have themes in mind when writing it, but
Right, but you don't let your personal authorial intent control the entire narrative, unlike these fucking propagandistic shysters who wouldn't know a nuanced point if it bit them on the ass.
funny that you mention it. Mention them.
Oh boy.
It's like, wow, Freeform let me do a teen show about slavery and genocide. I feel very lucky. Creator Elliot Lawrence says. I feel like, let me, if you allow me, go on.
Just go so that I don't explode.
Right. Well, it's really brief. For the record, anyone who doesn't know, Freeform was once ABC Family, but got changed to Freeform, I think, in like 2016 or something.
I want to say it was like 2017, I think.
Either way, it's not. That's not that. It's not the really important thing. There are shows like kids shows and teen shows and stuff that touch upon slavery and genocide. I mean, Avatar: The Last Airbender, like literally one of the first episodes in the season, talked about the complete extermination of the air nomads.
Yeah, and lest we forget that a crucial part of season 2 of Avatar: The Last Airbender was the literal animal abuse and slavery of Appa by the sandbenders who then sold him to circuses, which
Yeah.
fucking
So
hell, that episode.
yeah. So it's because the creator kind of makes it sound like no other show has done this before.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. For one thing, fuck you, shows have been doing this for freaking ever. Second thing, fuck you, those themes aren't as deep and complex as you want them as you want to make them. And even if they were, fuck you, your overly simplistic lens of history is very often inaccurate.
Hmm.
For example, thing about slavery is so many people conflate slavery with talking about slavery with talking about race, because
However,
huh?
I was going to add because we actually covered this in one of my history classes in high school. So,
Yeah. But yeah, the thing is, while a large number of slaves were black, there were also white slaves who were of lower class, because class was a much more important variable than race during slavery. The reason why the vast majority of slaves were black was because black people, i.e., really, really wealthy landowning black people in Africa, sold their own people or enemies of their own people, who also happened to be of the same race or similar racial groups, to white colonialists. And as an example, there were pejoratives like smoked Irish to describe black people. Why? Because one of the people that weren't black that were also regularly sold into slavery were fucking Irish.
as a as partially Irish, that kind of stings right there.
True, but if you really want to look into Irish history, you'll find a lot of things begin to
Oh, I
sting.
know. I know. For a while, we were treated like shit during the 1900s. Maybe even before that too.
Yeah, yeah.
Goddamn potato famine.
Curse you, random potato stifling weather patterns.
Yeah. Wow. Something to think that a lot of people have really gotten fucked over in history.
Yeah, most humans, unfortunately, throughout history, have been mistreated by some other category of humans. The problem, of course, being that bullshit like this propaganda here isn't going to help anything. Because if you try to convince people that they have been wronged by another set of people, the first response of most people is going to be, let's even the playing field and make things more fair. The problem being, if those people haven't been exploited by the people you're targeting them at, you're going to make them unnecessarily and uncharacteristically violent towards that variety of people for no goddamn adequate reason. Which, by the way, is exactly what happened during World War II under the Nazis. They didn't start oppressing the Jews by saying, we hate the Jews, let's oppress the Jews. They started hating the Jews and oppressing the Jews based on the fact that the vast majority of people who ran the banks during World War II were Jewish, because if you actually look into the history of Jews, you'll note that most countries that were run by Christians had laws against Christian people doing things like banking and charging interest, because there were biblical prohibitions against doing it. So they outsourced jobs that involved banking and charging interest to people who weren't Christians, i.e., those nomadic Jews that were always trying to escape from some fucked up situation they were in. And as a result, Jews became very good at banking. And as a result, a lot of Jews went into banking. And then some Nazis who were butthurt over how badly Germany lost World War One went and said, hey, there's way too many Jews in the upper echelons of the banking industry. We should make it more fair. And that led to people hating, fearing, and mistrusting Jews, which then led into we hate the Jews, let's oppress them. It's actually very hard to convince people to oppress people simply based on the desire to hate somebody. If you want somebody to oppress somebody else, you first need to convince them that they have some unearned privilege over you. because human beings, and frankly most mammals, they've actually done studies with monkeys that demonstrate this, have an innate desire to make things fair. Like there's one example that I can think of where they were doing an experiment with marmoset monkeys, and one monkey was given sort of a just generic like food biscuit for doing a task. And then another monkey comes along, and just to demonstrate this, they give that monkey a grape, which is apparently by the monkeys considered to be better than the generic food biscuit. And naturally, the one that was given a generic food biscuit for doing that task went fucking ape shit because it's not fair for one of them to be given a generic food biscuit and the other one to be given a grape because grapes are better according to monkeys.
I mean, yeah. How would you feel if I got a cookie and you got like a stale cracker?
Yeah, I'm not saying the monkeys are wrong. I'm just saying for the sake of accurately demonstrating the experiment, you kind of have to defer to the monkey's sense of what's better and what's not. Point being, even like our distant relatives in the monkey kingdom understand the concept of fairness and get really, really fucking pissed off if they find something is unfair.
Yeah.
Which is why, generally speaking, if you want to oppress somebody or get somebody else to oppress somebody, you need to convince them that something about their relationship to those people is unfair and needs to be corrected. Because people will do a lot of things for the sake of fairness, but most people won't generally do things just for the sake of hating someone else.
Uh, Moving on.
Yeah, moving on.
Okay. Since Motherland charts the beginning of its alternate universe back to Salem witch trials of the 1600s, addressing all the social issues of the time is unavoidable for a show. Okay, it happened. It's shit that happened. It's not today. Just, I'm
And for the record, as somebody who's done an inordinate amount of research on this, you couldn't just research the actual year. You had to say the 1600s when everyone and their mother at this point knows it was 1692 specifically. The vast majority of the Salem witch trials happened.
I'm just
It's literally one Google search away. You can literally type in right now what year were the Salem witch trials, and Google will tell you 1692 before you're even finished typing. I'm betting because they have that autocomplete feature. I'm sorry. I know that was really petty, but these people are paid journalists and they can't even be bothered to do the basic equivalent of a fucking Google search. The actual fuck.
well. Also, I'm curious to see.
If it actually does do that.
No. I mean, the people who actually work on Salem, like, do they do any actual research for this?
That is a good question. Given that none of the names of the people involved, or none of the names of the characters have anything to do with the names of the people who were actually accused, I would say no, because if I were writing a Salem style show, and it was supposed to be like a modern take on the Salem witch trials, I would probably make the main characters the descendants of one or more of those families, just for the sake of referencing it. But they didn't. I don't know if they thought it would be cliche to do that or if they just didn't bother. But if I were writing it, I would have made the main characters like last names Hale or Putnam or Sibley or Nurse or one of the big names of the people who were accused of
Corey.
witchcraft in 1692.
If I was going to be characters after certain people that were associated with the witch trials, Giles Corey, you know.
Yeah, Corey would be a good example as well, or Good, because of course Sarah Good.
Mm.
was one of the three originals to be accused, if I remember correctly. It was Sarah Osborne, Sarah Good, and Rebecca Nurse, I believe, were the first three after Tituba, because Tituba is the one who basically sold everyone out. Not that I blame her, because goddamn, she was kind of in a screwed situation. Although to be fair, given that she probably did practice some kind of tribal shamanism that we would today sort of group under the vaguely voodoo hoodoo sort of heading, she is probably the closest thing they got to what they would consider an actual witch.
Mm.
Especially given that she did actually show Abigail Williams and Betty Paris a charm to divine the future by cracking an egg into a glass of water, if I remember correctly. That was what sparked off the Salem witch trials. They were trying to divine the future husbands they would marry by squeezing an egg into a glass of water and using it to scry.
Shall I move on?
Yes.
In the reality of the series, Witch General Sarah Adler's early successes fighting America's wars made the government realize they needed a bigger pool of witch soldiers, which turned their sights to the victims of America's original sin.
Okay, that's a bit dramatic, even for someone who A, is a practicing occultist, and B, is obsessively fastidious about researching the Salem witch trials and witch trials in general.
Well, also, you are that kind of drama theater gay type guy too, so.
Well, yeah, I'm prone to excessive and like dramatic pronouncements, especially given that my vocabulary is substantial and occasionally over dramatic. And even I'm looking at that, like calling the witch trials of 1692 America's original sin is a bit sketchy at best. Granted, don't get me wrong, it was a terrible, terrible thing, and I think we would all be better off if it didn't happen, especially because the witch trials of 1692 were actually one of the latest witch trials to happen. But calling it America's original sin is a bit over dramatic even for me. And incidentally, the vast majority of accusers during the witch trials were women. So what now exactly? If this is supposed to be all about women power, are we not going to acknowledge the fact that like 90% of the accusations were done by Betty Paris, Abigail Williams, and a couple of their friends? The girls of Salem, Massachusetts were the ones who were pointing the fingers towards the quote unquote witches.
Oh yeah. Oh, baby.
What the hell? What happened? Okay, I'm assuming he stepped away from the mic in order to deal with whatever the fuck was happening there. I hope. If you're talking brainstormer, I can't hear you, and if you stepped away, then
I'm here. And weird shit's happening at my house right now.
Okay.
If anyone has that one family member, you'll know what I mean.
I'm gonna go ahead and assume black sheep related shenanigans.
No, just you ever have that one family member that's just like constantly doing the marching to the beat of their own drum?
Uh-huh. That would be my brother. Yeah. And when both of my brothers decide to wrestle at fucking 9 o'clock at night, it always creates a ruckus. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely know how that works.
Yeah, so if you have any of those family members that are like weird and kind of annoying, y'all know what I mean. You all know my pain.
Okay, so
Uh,
I'm going to attempt to entertain y'all while he's dealing with that shit.
no, I'm good. I'm fine.
Okay,
Right.
so shall we move on then?
Yeah. Okay, where was it? Yeah. Much of the early military ranks were filled by black people and black women in particular, and these women became military heroes, Lawrence says.
Okay, are we talking in the alternate history you're talking about, or are we talking in actual history? That's a bit ambiguous.
I think I think it's being referred to this show, like the alternate history.
Okay, so I'm guessing that's because of the ties of the quote unquote black community to things like hoodoo, voodoo, and American Conjure, I would imagine. I'm thinking that's where we're talking.
I thought it was a reference to Tituba, who essentially like was the first accused witch.
True. It could very well be that. Although both are kind of relevant to Tituba because, like I said, she did sort of bring um the sort of shamanic folk practices of the Caribbean islands with her when she came to Salem, and it was her attempt to teach Betty and Abigail scrying that started the whole thing in the first place.
Mm. Um. Hmm. I'm sorry. Did you have anything else to say?
No, I'm kind of perturbed by the kind of racist implications of that. Like all black people are semi tied into voodoo and hoodoo and shit
Uh,
in this
it's not.
context.
That's not. I just assume it's like the witches of the earliest ranks for the witch
Right.
army.
I'm just saying it's very typecasting ish
Yeah, but
and
dude, it doesn't refer to voodooism at all. Yeah, voodoo.
well not necessarily, but maybe I'm actually doing a better job at their job than they are doing, but like that's still a little bit racist-ish.
I think you read
Not
too much into it, and in this case, you're the racist.
it's possible, but I'm just saying that if anyone else had a show where all black people or a vast majority of black people were tied into a cultural tradition because of their race, these people
No, dude. That's just it. At most, I'm thinking this is like some just virtue signaling bullshit.
well, I know, but that's what I'm saying. When they do it, it's virtue signaling. But if anyone else made that connection, then people would be losing their minds because more racism. So yeah, just as long as we're being consistent with our moral axioms and everything here.
All right. Okay. Ah. Well, this is interesting. The success of black women in the colonial armies hastened the end of slavery. And so, yeah, this is giving more information about the world.
Okay, the alt history. Okay.
Yeah. The success of black women in colonial armies hastened the ending of slavery and led to an alternate future in which black dynastic families, known as the High Atlantics, are among the most powerful people in the country.
Okay, so that's just some SJW we was Kang's bullshit then. Okay.
I don't know. It sounds interesting on paper.
Like as a base concept, I can see that being interesting, but given the context they're pulling it from, I don't see this as being anything other than extremely heavy-handed tripe.
I mean, to be fair, if we're to think realistically in this alt history where there are people who use magic,
Mm-hmm.
there would there would be some type of classism thing.
Well, I mean, yes and no, because it depends. It very much depends on what exactly we're talking about here, because like um not exactly related, but shortly after this era that they're building the alt history off of, um there was an explosion of things like hoodoo, root work, voodoo, and American conjure, but there was also a sort of rediscovery of um occultism among the upper classes of, white Europeans, with people studying like spiritualism, or the likes of Aleister Crowley and Samuel MacGregor Mathers resurrecting the ancient knowledge of medieval grimoires. So I think it would ultimately be fairly even. In particular, I'm thinking of a movie that was released in 1991, um, called To Cast a Deadly Spell, which is actually a really good sort of detective noir movie, but that's neither here nor there. It's set in a semi-alternate version of 1948, where after the war, because of the occult aspect of World War II, everyone started using magic more, and it became more commonplace. And I think if anything like that happened, it would be kind of like that. And not to mention, and I hate to be this guy, but most of the American magic system that we have, obviously there are sort of African influences and tribal influences and Germanic influences and whatnot, because America, great melting pot, yada yada. But a large part of our magical understanding as Americans comes from the British Isles. So you can't honestly tell me that in a world where magic is more overt than it is in the proper one, um, that there wouldn't be still, European magic users utilizing the ancient magic of the Druids and shit. Because that would, I mean, how? Just keeping it within the context of America, there are um the uh the mag the hex magics of the Pennsylvania Dutch, which are sort of European shamanism that's vaguely sort of tethered to Christianity. It's a bit confusing, as is the case with most American folk magic. But point being, I don't think I don't think there's any reason why black people in particular would be any more suited to these sort of high families than anybody else, especially given the long ass history of magic in the British Isles.
Hmm.
But I get what they're trying to do is use magic as a metaphor for let's even up the cultural power zeitgeist, yada 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 bullshit. But the problem is if you actually know anything about these topics, that's some bullshit is the thing. Every culture of humans basically on the planet has some form or other of magic. So if we're going with the everyone's magic is more effective than it currently is alternate history route, then honestly, everyone is pretty equally armed, unless you want to say that one particular method of magic is more powerful than the others, which I
Um,
suppose you can do, but if you're gonna do it, you have to not be arbitrarily bullshitting for political and propagandistic reasons, which I think you are.
hmm, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to think. I had something, but I forgot it. Oh,
Sorry.
no, I just remembered it. For honestly, I think they were going the if I remember correctly, they're going the route that magic is passed down in bloodline, and basically witches are like a different species.
Hate, 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 hate. Also, dear SJW creators of Motherland Fort Salem, if magic is carried uh, around explicitly and exclusively in bloodlines in this universe, then that means that one race of humans is better than the other races of humans, i.e., the ones that can use magic are by default better than the ones who don't. So, are you honestly telling me that in your alt history where magic is the great equalizer that makes the quote unquote oppressed not oppressed anymore, you're going to start talking about racial purity? Are we actually going there? Is my question. Because if we're actually going there, then I really think you may have overestimated your ability to correctly do this. Because if you want to go my diversity and my equality, and then immediately start talking about racial purity by proxy, you're doing it wrong. With even within your own fucking bullshit ideology, to imply that one race is better than another race completely contradicts your entire moral schema. You stupid, stupid, stupid fucker. Not to
Mhm.
mention that it's lazy, contrived, and inaccurate in every conceivable dimension otherwise. But yeah, if we're just looking at this in the political moral dimension, you done fucked up your own point if you're making magic genetic, ladies and gentlemen, and
Mhm.
others. Ah,
Though I would say if there is the whole magic through bloodline thing, it can work simply on the fact that what if um, like your family has a certain affinity towards a certain type of magic.
right. There is blood magic. I'm not gonna lie. There are cases where if a extremely powerful practitioner has children, their children will have some sort of affinity for it, generally speaking. There's the old sort of British superstition of the seventh son of a seventh son is the strongest possible wizard, and so on and so forth. And yeah, blood magic and psychic predisposition are a thing in terms of modern day conceptions of occultism. I'm just saying that to say that that's the only method for magic, or to say that quote unquote normal people can't learn it with skill, not only is complete bullshit and goddamn cockamamie bullshit world building, but it's also completely anathema to the point they're trying to make about diversity, inclusion, and all of the appropriate social justice buzzwords.
Mm-hmm.
Because one if one race of people objectively has a set of powers that other humans don't have, then that at least implies some kind of racial purity. And um, given that this show is so heavily focused around an alternate version of the military, it's kind of almost looking like a magical equivalent of the Nazis, which isn't to say that there weren't, occultists in the Nazi party, because my dear God, how many times have I been called a Nazi just because I came out as an occultist? Not to mention all my fucking political beliefs, which most people think makes me a Nazi anyway. But that's neither here nor there. So you're telling me that your ideal sort of alternate history where you get to stick it to the patriarchy creators of Motherland Fort Salem is basically one in which there's a feminist, militaristic, fascist patriarchy of witches or matriarchy of witches. Do you not see the problem there? Do I have to explain to you why that's complete and utter anathema to your own philosophical beliefs here? You can't just change the teams that are winning the game and then stop bitching about how you hated the game, given that you just spent 20 minutes whining about how you hated the rules of the game. But that just goes to prove something I've increasingly noticed about SJWs.
Don't.
If if they if they're the ones in charge of the hierarchical system, suddenly they don't give a shit about hierarchies. But if they're not the ones in charge of the hierarchy, oh boy, all hierarchies are all of a sudden bad.
Shall we move
Moving
on?
on.
Okay.
Yes.
One of Motherland's three main witches, Abigail Bellwether, hails from one of these powerful families and views her induction into military leadership as a birthright. Motherland's social and political commentary continues out from there and blossoms further in its present day, which has some startling similarities to our own world. While witches' status as decorated soldiers have led to a more equitable and at times outright matriarchal society, there is a growing sense that young witches lack meaningful choices in their lives.
So you're telling me that in this hypothetical world where women have almost exclusive rights to magic and they work with the military and it's almost fucking magical Nazism, more or less, they're still somehow hypothetically oppressed because you need it to make a political point. How in the actual sodomistic fuck?
Or, as a pro witch terrorist organization is fond of putting it, conscription is slavery.
Oh, darling, you do not want to go there. You do not want to go there at all. Because outside of your little quote unquote satire, you know who does the vast majority of the conscription? Men. And you want to know something else? When men gave women the vote, they gave women the vote without the obligation to serve their country in the military. When upper class men gave other men the vote, they gave the vote to those men at the price of conscription. This is important because if you are conscripted to the military, there is a considerable possibility you could be killed or blown the fuck up. Meaning, basically, effectively, that women gave or men gave women the votes at the price of nothing. They gave it to them just gratis, and men gave other men the votes at the price of their fucking lives, you twats. And even today, in countries where there is still a draft, women can be drafted. Men still can, in fact, and do often get drafted. I can't honestly, but how do they lack this level of self-awareness? They don't. There are feminists who will genuinely defend male conscription in countries because men are the stronger sex, quote unquote, and they should, be forced to defend their women folk because it's the man's job to do the protecting, yada yada yada, traditionalistic bullshit. But in this alternate universe where it is categorically the opposite, and apparently the vast majority of women have a literal power that men don't have, they're actually pulling the conscription to slavery card for their hypothetical reverse situation. But they still don't consider conscription slavery when in the real life, men do it. I don't see. This is why I'm a men's rights advocate. Because people can be this fucking backwards blind and not even care. Oh.
You good?
For now, move on before I have to suffer a brain aneurysm, please.
Okay. I mean, it's somewhere between utopia and dystopia, right? Lawrence says. I always want to make things kind of gray and complicated. I don't ever want the show to be monolithically good or evil.
Okay, so let's examine what you just implied there. I'm going to assume that the utopian part of your statement there refers to the fact that this hypothetical civilization is more matriarchal. And you're going to assert that the conscription part of this hypothetical matriarchy makes it somewhat dystopian. Fine. But you do realize that means that you just said that a matriarchy is inherently superior to anything resembling a patriarchy, and that the only problem with this civilization of yours, this hypothetical civilization of yours, is making women do something that men have to do in the actual real world and you don't give a shit about. So, patriarchy, worst thing ever. Hypothetical matriarchy, it's damn near a utopia if only we could convince women not to do the thing that men have to do in real life. Fucking hell. The mind boggles at this just sheer watertight levels of self-awareness slides off these people's minds like they're fucking waxed car hoods. I can't imagine this dearth of self-awareness. How can you possibly be this unaware of your own implication? How in the actual infinite fuck?
Moving on. As a result, when the show picks up with Fort Salem and its military witch training exercises, there is a sense that one of the most powerful institutions in the United States has begun to decay. See, again, all this stuff sounds good on paper. I'm just more worried about the execution.
Yeah, and the context.
That too.
Because every ounce of context we're given based on the interviews that this publication has done, and also the actual trailer and the sort of concept of the series, sounds like this is going to be terrible. This sounds like it's going to be a worse version of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which, while I really enjoy Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, it does have moments where it's straight up feministy crap too. Even though I think it's far more tolerable than this is going to end up being.
Where was I? Okay, it's an institution that has an illness within it. One says we haven't really unpacked that yet, but there's a bit of a genetic crisis in terms of witch birth rates, particularly with the guys. There are male witches, but there are so few of them that they're not even allowed to be in combat. Fewer and fewer witches are born every year, and later in the series we'll find out why. There's a reason.
Okay, so you're okay. first things first, you're genuinely pulling the birth rate shit, which is actually a alt-right, like, not in the sense of, like, the term alt-right gets used for basically anyone that doesn't conform to the usual moral schema, but in the actual sense of basically what amounts to modern-day neo-Nazis, the proper alt-right. Birth rates are a talking point of the actual proper alt-right. And you're straight up gonna make that reference. And you're going to say that there are fewer male witches than female ones because, and they're not allowed to be in combat. Gee, I wonder what point you're trying to make there. Could it be a point about women's rights somehow? Because women something aren't given proper placement in the military, yada yada yada. And also, speaking as a male occultist, you can damn well bite me. Again, we just went over the etymological history of the word warlock. So yeah, you can fuck right off with that shit entirely. You ignorant, metaphor-laden son of a bitch.
Okay. You think the show is going to reverent towards the witch military complex, and that's not true. Producer Kevin Misick adds, while the slow crumbling of our society's most important institutions is certainly heady stuff, Motherland is able to make social statements in subtler, more personal ways as well.
Yeah. That laugh was totally warranted. First of all, second of all, Mr. I forgot his name. What is his name? Milan?
Hold on, wait.
The the guy who they were just talking about. Is it Milan? That
No, it's Kevin Misick.
okay, Mr. Missick, and that sounds way too close to Mr. Meeseeks, and I find that hilarious as a fan of Rick and Morty. But that's neither here nor there. Mr. Missick, how about instead of trying to make political statements, you pose political questions? How about instead of trying to make political statements, you present a political scenario instead? Instead of assuming you already have the right answer and you need to beat that answer into people's heads, like every fucking propaganda piece like this does, you present people with all the available information, unfiltered by a lens, and let them goddamn make up their own minds. It's exactly like the fucking Joker thing. They got mad at Joker because it didn't try to make direct statements about shit, because it tried to present as much information as possible in as many like vectors and variables as possible, and didn't give priority to one over the others because it didn't have an ego trip it needed to pull. But this guy is straight up saying he's going to put political statements into this shit, and I'm supposed to expect that it's going to be subtle and not propagandistic, given that everything we've seen thus far has been both pig ignorant of the subject matter in question and also biased as all hell. Yeah, you can fuck right off yet again. It's not the job of art to make political statements. It is, if anything, the job of art to make as many points about existence as possible, and to simply have a greater degree of value than the baseline of reality. That is what art is. And the sooner you guys get this socio-political bullshit out of your fucking heads and just focus on creating something of value that is of more value than it would be on its own, the sooner you can manage to get that shit out of your head, the better, because we'll actually have decent art again.
Mhm.
Honestly, Michelangelo must be rolling in his grave because Michelangelo is one of the only sort of artists slash philosophers that I agree with on this point. He famously said that the sculpture he was going to carve was already in the marble, and it was just his job to shape it and move the unnecessary bits out of the way so that the existing sculpture could shine of its own volition. Where the fuck did that level of self-awareness go? Where the fuck is the humble artist in this day and age? The one that doesn't put their own ego ahead of their art. The one that doesn't bend their art over the fucking banister and start fucking it just to make a point.
Hello.
Ah, fucking hell. Thank God.
Granted, I don't really think I can call myself an artist because I've never really published anything of my work. So,
Trust me, dude. If there's any justice in this world, you will get there one day, and you will become uber famous, and I will say I told you so.
all right. Okay. Where was I? Okay. The concept of female sexuality is important to the show, as ma myth. Hold on. Methri, Methrillian Methrillian lines of succession matter most for which status women's sexuality is embraced more easily in motherland. Okay, what
Uh,
about guy sexuality?
huh?
Male sexuality, that's a thing too.
There's that, but there's also the fact that if we're going off of the medieval definition of witch, which I'm assuming we are because it's rooted in the Salem witch trials, which is like the last dying gasp of sort of the medieval definition of the word witch. According to the Malleus Maleficarum, which was like the witch hunting manual of the Middle Ages, all witchcraft, quote, comes from carnal lust, which basically means that the way magic of the variety that the church was concerned with was accomplished was by manipulating the energies of someone's sexuality. And the main reason why witchcraft was considered sinful was because it was essentially a misuse of the quote unquote generative instinct, i.e., the the original sort of traditionalist view of sexuality was that sexuality was to be used to generate new life, i.e., children, and any overindulgence in it otherwise was considered sinful because it was wasting what essentially was a God given gift. Witchcraft was considered doubly sinful because it was misusing that generative instinct, but it was also, according to the church, giving that sexual power over to the devil, which was also by obvious implication bad. And you've completely missed, again, the idea that when women were accused of witchcraft, they were called a word for wise. And when men were accused of witchcraft, they were called a word for traitor because women were considered naive enough that they could be easily manipulated by the devil. And men were considered accountable to their choices no matter how easily tricked they were. Also, the main reason why the vast majority of people accused of witchcraft were women was because it was considered that the women had the stronger generative instinct. Because, of course, despite however integral the man might be to creating a child, it's still the woman who A, does the birthing itself and also the nurturing of the child when the child is born. Therefore, it was considered in the Middle Ages that women had a stronger degree of sexual energy than men. Therefore, they were more likely to be prone to misusing it and or getting tricked into misapplying it. Therefore, they were more likely to be witches. So essentially, the reason why women were more often accused of witchcraft wasn't because people wanted to oppress women. It was because women were essentially considered better than men in a given way, and that greater power essentially needed to be correlated with greater responsibility. Therefore, women had to be more chaste and use their sexuality more sparingly because they essentially, according to the church, had a stronger sex drive than men. And you can look directly at a case where men were viewed objectively better than, or women were viewed objectively better than men, and you can see that and say women were oppressed by the fact that we thought they were better than men by default. And you can completely erase any semblance of the importance of male sexuality in that equation whatsoever, because you don't understand the history of the things you're talking about, and it's fucking pissing me off.
Right.
You don't understand the history of witchcraft, and that's annoying to me in particular because I'm an occultist. But even beyond that, you don't understand the nature of the history of human sexuality, and it's making you make up all kinds of abstract woo-woo bullshit reasons for things that no one ever actually believed in. Fucking hell.
Lawrence of the show even co-opts a real aspect from the Salem witch trial era into a more modern, empowering light. During the Salem witch trials, any moles or blemishes upon a woman's skin could be deemed by witch hunters as witch marks. These were believed to be marks a witch received when she pledged her allegiance to the devil. In Motherland Fort Salem, witches' marks are not only real, they are celebrated as a marker of witches' sexuality as they glow after they've had sex. Congratulations, you can telegraph to everyone that you lost your V card. I was trying to make a joke, I said, congratulations, you can telegraph to everyone that you just lost your V card.
Yeah, but also, so question, are we actually going the witches are servants of the devil route in this universe? Because if so, I don't think you're helping your own arguments, because you're basically tying your empowerment messages to the literal source of evil for most people who watch this show. Because I'm assuming the vast majority of people in America are still a member of one of the three Abrahamic religions, i.e., Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. Secondly, warlocks allegedly had witch marks too. It was essentially a brand that the devil used to mark his property according to the medieval church. It was essentially, we have signed this pact, therefore here, I will mark you so that everyone knows that you are my property. But again, feel free to completely fucking erase the male half of the equation here, even though men were 35 to 40% of the accused during witch trials as well. So, yeah, get down with your bad stuff with that. You may have associated your protagonist with the literal devil, for one thing. For another thing, you've completely misapprehended how the history works. And for another thing, you're ignoring men again.
Maybe when we get to the end of this, I might just do like a quick pitch for how I would have done a story like this.
Sure.
More than likely, it will be 100 times better than what we're actually getting from this.
Most likely.
Okay. Where was I? Okay. 2 Motherland actresses are given an opportunity to examine this aspect of the show's empowerment narrative early on as Rayla Hickson and fellow Fort Salem trainee Scylla Amelia Holm develop serious chemistry in the pilot. Jessica, who plays Tally, gave us a great tool. She said, pick something that you truly do love about the person in real life. It's something that you can engage with and think about consciously as you're acting in the scene, Dixon says. For me, it was obviously Holmes' eyes because she opens her mouth and any person just stops and listens to her. She's incredibly engaging when she speaks. Okay?
I
And
don't really have a problem with this because this is just saying, an actress in a story saying, "My co-star is awesome," and I can't take any sort of issue with that because
neither
if I worked with somebody on a regular basis, I would hope that I could make friends with them like that too. So fair play.
again, I must say, hello.
True. All too true.
We both really try to be generous and present with each other, home ads. I think it's so hard to put words to because to me, it's something that just happened. First time we rehearsed a scene together, it was like everything just ticks in. Ultimately, chemistry will come in use for all the actresses involved in Motherland's all-women cast. It's up to them to communicate the show's most important theme above all else.
Okay.
I don't think I've seen anything on TV that has shown an all-woman cast and women in charge, women in power.
Although you want to know something interesting, the vast majority of TV viewers are women. And women sometimes enjoy seeing men because women, in general, also like seeing men. Not to mention the fact that women like seeing men they find attractive because women want to have bangable fantasies. Not complaining because as a bisexual dude who like 70% of the time prefers guys, I also like bangable, attractive people. But that is neither here nor there. Point being, if you want to take issue with the fact that fewer all female shows exist on television, you might want to take it up with the predominant viewer of television, which is women. I would like a lot of popcorn for that super productive conversation because what you essentially have here is the feminist block of people essentially trying to police the desires of all the other women on the planet and probably several men too, because of course not every woman is a feminist, but not every feminist is a woman either. So yeah, feminists, please go on to the, stay-at-home moms who sit around watching, sitcoms and Lifetime movies and the shopping channel and the cooking channel every day and tell them that their personal preferences for what they like to watch on TV are wrong because something, 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 my sisterhood. Again, I'll need a lot of popcorn for that super productive conversation, and you're totally not going to get completely BTFO'd by the average stay-at-home parents or anything.
Right. Motherland tells women in general that it's cool to be powerful, Williams says. And that is the end of the article.
It was never wrong for women to be powerful. It was entirely contextual within what they use that power for. And need I remind you once again that 90% of the accusers during the Salem witch trials were a group of young teenage women who, because of the social power afforded to them, got 19 people hanged and one person crushed to death under fucking giant rocks. Hate this. Hate this so much. We can never actually hold women accountable for anything they do, even to other women, because that would be misogynistic. But we're still going to insist that women become increasingly more special in complete defiance of the fact that we've always viewed women as special, basically since the fucking Stone Age. and men can literally just go hang if we feel like they're not pulling their weight enough. God damn it.
Yeah. Well, as we wait for the next article to load, I did say that I would, I would,
Try to fix this fucking cockamamie bullshit. So
yeah.
please go ahead and do that.
Granted, this is more just me brainstorming, and not like, because usually I take time to come up with ideas, but Spitfire at this moment. Um, all in all, I would have kind of an ensemble cast, if anything, because I think for this kind of show, it works better to have an ensemble. I mean, obviously, you would have a main character, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it just makes more sense to have an ensemble casting.
You want the group dynamic to be good, kind of like it is in The Magicians.
That, and I think bigger group, you get more viewpoints, you get more kind of varying philosophies, and
And
just
excuses to explore the various aspects of the world building.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would keep the military thing because I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
But if anything, I would change it from like not from this Salem witch trials. It would be more of everything changed when the pilgrimage happened.
Ah.
I think I might be borrowing from Carnival Row in that sense.
Which reminds me, did you ever get a chance to watch?
No, I did not because I do not have Amazon.
Yeah, I have Amazon, but I still haven't bothered to check out Carnival Row because it looks kind
Right,
of.
but in the sense that not on it's not just like regular people like who were persecuted because of their religion, but also witches and various magic users migrated to the new world to
Yeah,
set up their own land there.
yeah, because the whole point of the New World was supposed to be like you can build a civilization from scratch. In fact,
Um,
that's one of the reasons why Salem was called Salem, because it was named after Jerusalem. It was supposed to be the New Jerusalem, or the Puritan attempt to
yeah.
found a new Jerusalem.
Granted, I think I would change a lot of history if we are involving like magic, which would be common knowledge instead of hidden.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if anything, maybe Salem would be the capital of America in this kind of world.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. Um, but ultimately, it would kind of honestly, it would be a lot like Game of Thrones in a modern sense.
And the funny thing is, they kind of already did that with using the Salem witch trials in the show Salem, which I actually think is really good, even though they go with the more medieval understanding of what the definition of a witch. They go with the person who made a deal with the devil sort of definition.
I don't know if I would keep the name. Honestly, you know what? I would keep it still called the America. Like America. It
Mm-hmm.
would probably be a very different America, though. Again, like just how different the history would be.
Well, I mean, it's not as though occultism didn't have an impact um on American history. Like, for example, there's a really, really great book on the topic of sort of American occultism throughout history, called Occult America by guy by the name of Mitch Horowitz, I believe is his name.
Um,
Um,
though I would honestly, okay, again, like I would incorporate various different other stories, like Game of Thrones, like for like kind of a politics kind of thriller story,
mhm,
and also maybe Full Metal Alchemist
mhm,
in terms of like how magic would be used in a sense, not like the alchemy, but like just like how action is used with the kind of magic they use, I guess.
mhm. the magic system in Full Metal Alchemist isn't bad. It's just that they keep trying to hammer home science, 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 and completely miss the fact that they're basically using Neoplatonic magic throughout the entire thing.
Yeah. And also, I would probably incorporate an idea of which tribes or which clans.
Hmm.
And the witch marks would be more of like tattoos for the clans.
That would be interesting.
Probably, if anything, I would do research in type of runes that would become the marks for those clans.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like
Interesting.
maybe 13 clans as a reference to 13 colonies from England.
So would you give each rune like would you actually have each symbol actually have a function or power or
Well, that too, but again, also as a symbol for that clan as well.
hmm because that could be really interesting if you had like 13 clans and each clan like specialized in a different kind of magic based on
Yeah.
sort of the powers of their rune.
Yeah. So again, like I'm just spitballing at this point, just how I would have done it because I can't really think of a concise story I would do. If
Hmm.
anything, I would probably have it set maybe in the like an alternate 1920s or something,
That would be interesting.
or 1910s.
That would definitely be interesting. And also you could have like an alternate version of Aleister Crowley or Samuel Mather's cameo at some point, which would be fun.
Yeah, so it's just because one thing I like period pieces, and I always like to see like how an alternate time period as well.
Well, also that was like smack bang in the middle of the Victorian occult revival that actually happened in the like late 18 and early 1900s. So it works perfectly well, perfectly to it sort of blends actual history and whatever new history you build upon it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
If anything, I would incorporate some magical creatures as well.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to in the show. I would be stunned if we never saw like cryptids or fairies or something in the Motherland show. Um, but then again,
You know what actually would be really interesting? Like, what if the First World War was being fought with magic?
like I said, during to cast a deadly spell, they sort of implied that instead of instead of nukes, the big deciding factor of World War II was um, which side's magicians were better.
Yeah. So yeah, all in all, it would be a very different United States, different world entirely because of magic. Because I do think it would be a butterfly effect kind of thing.
Hmm. I obviously I don't think it would be so different because I've done
Well,
plenty of
I'm talking about like that really flashy kind of magic, not like
right,
very.
but I'm just saying the only thing that would really change would be like the scale of things. It wouldn't really change like it wouldn't necessarily change the dynamics because like it's sort of like if you made an alternate history where espionage was more common. It wouldn't change a whole lot because there were spy masters in even like the Revolutionary War and shit. So
Mhm.
making spies more common wouldn't change much.
Yeah.
Well, by the same token, magic has had an impact, whether you believe it actually functions and exists or not, on history just by itself as a concept. Now, if you take that magic and you scale it up, then it would essentially just be more. Yeah, my thinking is it would just kind of be more of the same of stuff that already happened.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like as an example, in World War II, um, there was actually a time when the Nazis were going from country to country looking for occult artifacts like the Spear of Destiny and pieces of the True Cross and shit. And there was a time, allegedly, where General Patton of the American forces actually had to go and intercept the Nazi team that were looking for the Spear of Destiny, because the thought was um, he who holds the Spear of Destiny controls the destiny of the world. So they obviously couldn't let the Nazis get their hands on that on the off chance it worked. And of course, in the Cold War, one of the interesting things was there was actually a government grant for the studying of um, sort of psychic phenomena like remote viewing and shit. It was called the Star Wars Project, and one of the aspects of the Cold War that doesn't get a lot of attention was that the Russians and the Americans both had essentially what amounted to psychic divisions in the military that were supposed to like spy on each other using what's called remote viewing.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we spent enough time on that.
Mm-hmm.
And let us move on to The Boys.
Oh boy, the boys. Oh boy. Lol.
Yeah.
I inadvertently punned. I swear to God that wasn't on purpose.
I didn't even notice. Anyway, this is from Bounding the Comics. This was published, what was that? March 13th, 2020. Amazon's The Boys gender swap storefront for season 2. She's also a feminist.
Oh, hey. This is gonna be fun.
Oh, again, I've never really cared enough about The Boys, nor I haven't read it, nor have I watched the show. So
Yeah.
I'm
You
kind of looking at this with fresh eyes.
yeah. You already said that you didn't have Amazon, and Amazon is the people that do the boys show, so I would imagine you haven't seen it.
Well, that too,
Anyway.
and I also just didn't really care to
Mhm.
want to watch it. So,
It's all right. I don't think it's anything particularly special, to be
well, no,
honest
it's
with
just
you.
not my type of thing. You know, it's like it's very cynical. It's very, um, well, yeah, it's just very cynical, and I've never been one for cynicism.
Hmm.
Right. Amazon Studios, The Boys announced that they will gender swap Stormfront, turning the character into a female. Not only will Stormfront be a female, but she will also be a feminist. The new gender swap character was introduced via Entertainment Weekly, who revealed the character will be played by Aya Cash.
Yeah, let's just remark on the irony of a literal feminist Nazi, because of course Stormfront is a Nazi basically in the original The Boys, and of course Stormfront is the name of a neo-Nazi website, which I believe is where the character actually get their name from.
I will say though, the gender swapped feminist live action Stormfront looks cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like the costume looks good, and the actress, uh, pretty hot. I'm not gonna lie. And I say that as a respectful man, by the way, not as a
Mm-hmm.
misogynist or anything.
Oh God, misogyny.
Yeah, but yeah, Stormfront was originally introduced in The Boys #7 as part of the superhero group Payback, alongside Tech Knight, Mini Droid, and Swato. Okay, so this actually brings up an interesting topic about like gender swapping and
Mm-hmm.
revitalizing, like changing a character.
Mm-hmm.
Because and we've said it many times on this when it comes to like adaptations and stuff.
Yeah.
I
If you
don't.
can make if you can make the character better or at least equally as good as they were originally, I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, look at Miles Morales Spider-Man in Into the Spider-Verse. He essentially has nothing that in common with his comic counterpart.
Yeah.
But I think he's a better character because of it.
Yeah. And also Into the Spider-Verse is sadly the best of all Spider-Man movies so far.
Or I will say the Marvel movies, sure, but let's agree to disagree on the other ones.
I still think that it's better than the Sam Raimi ones.
You know?
Hmm.
Go fuck yourself.
I can't do that on air. That will gross so many people out.
Fair enough. And god damn it, you made me picture it, you bastard.
See, this is why you never tell me to go fuck myself. Because I will turn it around on you, and I swear to God.
anyway. Anyway. His powers include right. Before we move on. I honestly would have preferred if they made her like a second or third generation character with the name.
Yeah,
Because that,
like if they were
that would have made
the original Stormfront or something like that. Yeah, that might have
Yeah,
been better.
that could have made sense. I don't mind that they've gender flipped because honestly, she looks a lot better than the comic one.
And I'm not gonna lie, original Stormfront was kind of boring. So if this is what it takes to liven the character up, and if they actually use this to mock feminism and parody feminism, I will genuinely applaud them. Holy fuck.
Mm. Honestly, I see there's a lot of storytelling opportunity with like original Stormfront character.
Right, but I get the feeling that if they went with something resembling the original Stormfront character, they would take they would take pot shots at my toxic fandom, and I'm so
No. Well,
fucking
it's more of maybe you could turn him into like a redemptive hero. Because you hear all those stories about like former neo Nazis who like kind of change their ways after a certain event.
hmm. Although they could still do something like that with New Stormfront.
Yeah,
Especially
yeah. It's just
and again, if they try to equivocate Stormfront's Nazi sympathies with her feminist sympathies, I will applaud Eric Kripke just for the sheer brass balls this is gonna take.
yeah. I'm sorry, folks. That was me like getting into like a writer's mindset. Like I don't know.
Well, I mean that's what people come here for. They come to see me rant about obscure philosophical bullshit, and they come to see you writing Spurg everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on. His powers include flight, limited control of the weather, and the ability to fire powerful lightning out of his mouth. So he barfs lightning.
Yeah, that never fully made sense to me.
Yeah.
Because there's usually at least a passing technical excuse for how heroes' powers work, and I'm still left going, what the fuck is that about? Which again, anyone who's interested in sort of the mechanical ins and outs of how superheroes' powers work, read The Physics of Superheroes. It's an excellent book, and it's awesome.
Yeah. Funny enough, yeah, I really gotta find that book because Dawn's recommends me. And he and I have had chats about certain powers and like the physics of them.
Yeah, and I think you would like it a lot.
Hmm.
It also is for anyone that's interested in learning about sort of comic book universes but that doesn't know where to start. It's a good way of also familiarizing yourself with like the history and whatnot of comics because the guy who wrote it, massive uber nerd and knows his shit when it comes to like the history of comics.
Yeah. Okay. He is also a racist who admires Hitler and takes joy in committing genocide on behalf of Vought.
And they took that character and made her a feminist. So you know he's got it. You know they've got to be sneaking in some sort of commentary on feminism, and I love it.
Mhm. All right. As for Aya Cash, before taking on the role of Stormfront in The Boys, she played Jordan Belfort's assistant Janet in The Wolf of Wall Street. She also played Shelley Wexler in The Newsroom, Gretch Cutler in You're the Worst, and most recently Joan Simon in Foz, Foz, Fozzie slash Vernon. Verdon.
I know bumfuck nothing about any of those roles. Apologies to her.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking to Entertainment Weekly, Cash provided some details on her version of Stormfront. I think Stormfront is like a nuclear bomb that goes off in the seven. Maybe nuclear bomb isn't the right word. We're in Chernobyl. There you go. It's a Chernobyl thing. Hmm.
She went with a Russian example. That's kind of funny.
Yeah. Again, I like the costume. It looks really good. It kind of gives me some Black Widow vibes. Kinda.
Yeah, the costuming for the boys is actually pretty good.
Oh yeah, no, I might hate Homelander as a character, but I like his costume a lot in the show.
Hmm.
Uh, though Black Noir is kind of iffy for me.
Yeah, that character's always been um
Well, no, I like the quietness of the character.
mhm.
It's again the costume doesn't look that great. Is my problem.
Although this reminds me of a new or newer social justice term I heard recently. Apparently, someone is trying to make the term misogynoir a thing because apparently there's another level of hatred if you hate black women specifically, which is misogynoir because of course noir means black.
That just makes okay. One that makes you just racist, if anything.
Hmm.
Why do you gotta find new words? There are literally words to describe it. Whatever.
Because
That's not important.
they need to reframe those words to mean other things because reasons.
Yeah. Anyway. Oh hey, she has heels on her boots.
Ah.
Granted, she'll probably be flying a lot, so she doesn't have to worry about walking in them. But still.
You know how high heels were originally uh a feature of cavalry soldiers?
I did not know that because I don't study history like you do, Dalton.
Yeah, essentially they were originally there to help um cavalrymen in I believe in the Civil War um stay more balanced on the horses. And then because um of the height advantage that it gave when those men would hop off of their horses and go into town to procure supplies, women started wearing it as like a power and status symbol.
Hmm. Shall we?
We shall.
Right. She adds, I think she's here to blow up Vought. She's here to try to get Vought back to the original idea behind creating superheroes. and she can be quite the feminist. There's a lot of, I wouldn't say misdirect, but she but she also is a very empowered woman.
I once again wonder if Eric Kripke is going to use this to make fun of feminism, and if he does, he will have a slow clap from me.
Mhm.
If not, and he tries to frame her as better, at morally better as a person because she's a feminist, I'm going to be massively disappointed.
Yeah.
Because you took a character that was literally a goddamn Nazi and you made them a feminist, but you didn't actually use it to make fun of feminism. That would be shameful.
She oh, Anthony Starr, who plays Homefront, Homelander, I believe is what he meant,
Mm-hmm.
also weighed in on Cash's version of Stormfront. He
Yeah.
describes her as the grenade that gets thrown into Homelander's world and the world of the Seven. Yeah, she
Yeah.
really causes me so many problems.
Also, people bounding into comics, it would be hypocritical of us not to say this because we say it to everyone else. But goddamn, get an editor, please.
Yeah. Um, he continues, she's really social media savvy, where Homelander doesn't really have anything to do with that. Someone else is always running his accounts. He's almost like a Dawn Draper era character, and she's very young and new and fresh, and that's a massive challenge for him. While also being a father, so
Yeah.
oh, spoilers by the way.
And also, if they turn Homelander into an even bigger asshole and then start calling him a misogynist, I'm gonna be annoyed. Because Homelander is an awful enough person without the spectrum of misogyny hanging over him.
I am curious to see where that plot line with his like son goes, though.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I don't remember if I read the part that deals with that, or if they even have a son in the comic. I don't
No, no,
remember.
it's completely original thing for the show.
Yeah, I don't think they ever addressed it in the. In fact, I think there were several storylines in the comic where they specifically made the case that he couldn't be one, basically.
It's I don't know. Either way, there's another picture of Stormfront here. Actually, looks better than the official. Well, no, I guess this is also official, but you see more of the color in the suit.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't notice she has like metal bracers on her arms that have the American flag on it. It's neat.
Yeah, kudos to the designer for the show.
Yeah.
As much as the characters might infuriate us.
Okay. That's gonna be interesting. Star also indicates this that Stormfront is Homelander's equal. He's used to everyone being scared of him. She matches him. Cash also says that's not to say she doesn't understand his power and tiptoe around it sometimes, but she's also willing to challenge him. Ultimately, I think the dynamic between the two is terrifying and will change who Homelander is.
So, question: are you going to make her a bitch, or are you going to frame her as in the right when she quote unquote challenges him? Because I could see it going either way, and
Yeah.
the
Also,
way that it's being described makes me think she's going to be a bitch. But then again, she's a goddamn Nazi, so if anyone is free to be a bitch in fiction, then I would say it would be the Nazis, because the Nazis were a bunch of bitches.
also, advice for writers out there: characters, even if they're like protagonist characters, can be wrong and can be assholes sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's how they make. That's how you make people care about them.
Yeah, it's also how you create a character that is three-dimensional and actually well-rounded.
Yep.
And as we discussed last week, moral paragon characters are really, really hard to do correctly.
A part of I think there's one good one. Granted, it's not more. He's not exactly. He's a moral paragon, but it's more. It's been a burden for that character.
Hmm.
The Samaritan from Astro City, which I believe was written by Kurt Busiek.
I'm unfamiliar with that. Please fill me. Well, I'm aware that it exists, but I don't know much about it. So fill me.
It's very much an homage to practically all of comics, like the whole series.
Aha.
And the Samaritan is supposed to be like a Superman stand-in.
Hmm.
There are some videos I will like send to you after
Yeah.
because they're like good videos. Anyway, where was I? Caston indicates that there will be a bit of a twist when it comes to her character. You start off the season thinking she's thinking she's one thing and then discover she's another. She concludes there are quite a few times where you'll identify with her as an audience member or agree with what she says. I think those are the most dangerous people. I
The people the people that will hypothetically agree with this person. So are you going to say again, I'm hedging my bets and saying that they might be mocking feminism here, like they might point out how ludicrous feminism is, or they might double down on Nazism and basically say anyone who doesn't agree with us politically is a Nazi, like so many other goddamn shows.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna wait until the show actually comes out and then watch clips on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get mad yet. It if they're gonna make her say otherwise sensible shit, and then when people like us agree with them, then we get called Nazis, then I'm gonna hate it. But if they again use this to mock feminism and point out the ludicrousness of feminism, I will slow clap just for the sheer brass balls it's gonna take to do that in the Hollywood context.
Hmm. What do you think of the addition of Storefront with the characters' new changes from the comics? There is no
I
official release date yet for season 2 of The Boys, but some expect to see it around July 2020.
I I don't know because it very much depends on how long we'll be under goddamn quarantine. Um, whether we'll see it in July or not. I suspect that we'll be out of quarantine by then, but God only knows how long it's going to take to get the world back up and running.
Yep. We're just now waiting for the next article to load, and then we'll be watching a video. Hooray!
Hmm.
This is awkward.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So I watched Zombieland today,
First one or second one?
the first one.
Oh.
It was kind of a surreal experience watching Zombieland under quarantine. Although that's specifically why I wanted to find it because I made a promise to myself that I would watch it at least once while I was under quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly, I'm relating even more to Columbus than I would normally, which is saying something because I always found him to be a very relatable character.
I don't know why, but I always felt more akin to Tallahassee.
Yeah, because you have that I'm going to beat the shit out of anything that pisses me off streak in you. You in a zombie apocalypse would be both terrifying and also I would never want to be anywhere right next to you, because that would be where I would know I'd be safe. You'd be somewhere between Tallahassee and Negan during a zombie apocalypse, I imagine.
I'd be Casey Jones in the apocalypse. I would be Casey Jonesing the apocalypse. Yes, that's what I meant.
Yeah, yeah, that does not surprise me.
All I need is a hockey mask and a golf bag and a few more sports stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Although you do have at least enough money saved up that if you wanted to get more of that kind of stuff, you could.
Yeah, I can't exactly go out right now and buy the stuff.
No, but I'm saying whenever Florentine gets fucking over,
Yep.
things to keep in mind that you actually do have the disposable income now to buy those things if you want to. Also, Amazon is an option. I know you don't. I know you've never bought anything off online before, but Amazon is an option.
I have bought stuff online before. I just don't prefer it.
Ah,
No, it's just like I don't trust my money to be online. So
ah, fair enough.
a lot of scammers out there, folks. Careful with your money.
Yeah. Although Amazon is usually pretty good.
Oh yeah,
You
no, I agree with that. Okay. Bounty in the comics. Amazon's The Boys showrunner Eric Kripke confirmed season 2 will include storyline about rise of white nationalism. This was published March 16th, 2020.
just based on the title, Eric, my darling, there is effectively no modern day rise of white nationalism. There are maybe 5 people on the planet who are like major, genuine alt-right figures, and they are, to varying degrees, not paid attention to, are pariahs, or are just straight up laughed at. And you know what? They deserve to be, because they're fucking morons. To a man, each and every one of them is kind of a fucking moron. And Richard Spencer in particular is one of the most hilariously inept douche novels I have ever had the pleasure of watching a video of, because he's just fucking incompetent and it's hilarious. He is exactly the low T hipster doofus you'd imagine a modern day white nationalist to be.
Shall we?
We shall.
Amazon's The Boys showrunner Eric Kripke confirmed the second season will feature a storyline about the rise of white nationalism.
Again, there is none effectively.
Yeah. Kripke spoke with Coming Soon back in August 2019 about the second season and the inclusion of Stormfront in changing the character from a male to a female. He states, yeah, our version of Stormfront kind of evolves over the season, and I think the comic book version of Stormfront, with, again, great respect to the comic, which I love, it's a pretty straightforward character, you know? The first lines out of his mouth are like, Schnell.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. He is kind of a one-dimensional Nazi stereotype, so
Yeah.
yeah, fair enough.
He's pretty straight up, just like a full-on Nazi, and it's hard to do reveals with a guy like that.
I don't necessarily know what you might be revealing about Stormfront. I mean, like, you do know there were female Nazis, right? And more to the point, you know, the vast majority of the Nazis' ideology was, we need to protect the bloodline of Aryan women. So and I know I'm gonna get shit for saying this, but the Nazis were many things, but misogynist wasn't one of them. In fact, fun fact, despite the fact that Nazis actively persecuted homosexual men, they actually had no problem whatsoever with homosexual women.
Oh, those double standard bastards.
Honestly, no lesbian woman was put in a concentration camp because she was a lesbian woman. And when you take into account that basically close to 1 million homosexual men were put into concentration camp because specifically they were homosexual men or were thought to be homosexual men, because of course not everyone who was accused of being gay by the Nazis was actually gay, but that's neither here nor there. So yeah, that's yeah, the Nazis certainly wouldn't be foreign to the concept of women are awesome, yay.
Yeah, that's the other reason they hate Nazis. They were double standard bastards.
About basically everything. I mean, just look at Hitler himself. A man who was short, brown-haired, and green-eyed with a club foot injury.
Also, he wasn't German, he was Austrian.
Yeah, his ideal for the German people was blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 6'7" plus, Superman.
And again, I must point out that Captain America, who in his first issue punches Hitler right in the face,
Is
is exact.
basically the Nazis Superman made into a character. Yeah.
Yep.
Apparently America created the Nazis Ubermensch to beat the living shit out of the Nazis.
You know what's funny? I didn't realize that until like some years ago.
I
Like when I
think
was
I think I was the first one that mentioned it to you, I thought.
no. I figured that out like a few years ago. Uh, like when I was looking at Captain America, and I was like, I think I was studying some German history in history class,
Mhm.
and just I realized I just clicked.
It's like America's reaction to the Nazis. I know, we'll have them be beat up by literal irony made flesh. We'll take their concept of the most super of supermen, and we will create one so that it can beat the shit out of them for it.
Okay, moving on. But where the idea emerged, and without spoiling too much, what I'll say is, under the writer room mantra of bad for the world, good for the show, we're all news junkies, and we tend to pay attention to things that are happening out there in the world. And how do we use our superheroes as a metaphor for that? And I am horrified and sad to report that there is a rise in white nationalism.
No, there really, really isn't. There is a small group of maybe 500 people that follow Richard Spencer, and that's basically about it. Aside from like the garden variety actual Stormfront users that have always been around that are like less than 1,000 people probably worldwide. And the KKK, by the way, only has like a 900 people membership currently. So yeah, no, there really aren't, unless you want to misinterpret certain people who are not in any way white nationalists as white nationalists. Like if you want to say something like Sargon of Akkad or Count Dankula or um I can't think of any other, or Paul Joseph, like the only way you can genuinely believe that there's a rise in white nationalism is if you basically call a bunch of people who are definitively not white nationalists because you misunderstand or simply I would say that nations should be independent of the world government and should sort of look out for themselves and look out for their own culture. But that's not white nationalism. That's civic nationalism, which is completely different for the most part. And I'm sorry, but the full statement of countries should exist as separate entities is not tantamount to saying like we should get rid of everyone who's not white and close our borders. Those are very, very different statements.
Mm. Okay. It continues, and it's taking a very different form than it took in the 40s. Actually, technically, it started in the 30s after the Great Depression, or during the Great Depression, I believe, when
Yeah.
the Nazi
And,
parties.
and yes, there were American Nazi sympathizers during World War II.
I mean, there's a story that relates to like geek culture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when Jack Kirby and not Stanley, I can't remember who wrote the original Captain America story, and I feel bad that I don't. This went back when Marvel was Timely Comics.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when they first did that episode, but not episode, God damn it, my brain's a little shot right now.
Issue.
Yeah, yeah. When they did the first issue of Captain America, an American group of Nazi sympathizers would wait outside the Empire State Building because that's where they were at. That's where they were posted at,
Mm-hmm.
and wait. They would wait for the for the
Release
right
of
yeah for
issue.
yeah for the right for the writers and the artists of that Captain America issue, which again on the cover was Captain America punching Adolf Hitler in the face. Um, this well, for one thing, the mayor at the time was also a big fan of Captain America, and I believe also a lot of cops as well.
And a lot of people in the actual military.
Yeah, and basically the mayor had ordered a group of police officers to stand guard and protect Jack Kirby and the writer of Captain America.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what they did? You know what they did to get back at those guys and also still stick it to the Nazis over in Germany?
Mm.
They did the second issue cover of Captain America punching Adolf Hitler again.
Like, oh, you don't like us taking a stance on Hitler? Well, fuck you then.
Yeah. So,
As Stan Lee famously said in an interview for the documentary Comic Book Superheroes Unmasked, we were fighting Hitler before our government was fighting Hitler because, of course, America back then was smart enough to have a non-interference policy. And then Pearl Harbor happened and the shit hit the fan because you don't fuck with America, motherfucker. Because that's just not, it is not done by
goddamn
anyone
right.
who values their life. But yeah, comic writers were actually taking a position against the Nazis before the Roosevelt administration, I believe, at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Was
If I remember correctly, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster made a Superman issue where basically they had Superman just grab,
Hitler and then take him off to be arrested, basically.
yeah, to the UN. Well, no, wait, the United Nations wasn't set up then, wasn't?
Yeah, and no, I think it was.
Oh,
And then of course, Hitler saw that and started calling Superman a Jew.
I mean, technically he was.
Well, yeah, I mean his birth name was El, or had L in it, which is the Jewish sort of generic name for God, and he was literally based on Moses, and essentially Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster's power fantasy of wanting to be able to throw cars around and shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, fair enough, but you've got to be doing something right when Hitler is like, this is Jewish though. Lol. Pissing off Hitler's fun.
Yep. Alright, it takes a very social media savvy trying to attract young men and women form. And so we got really interested in creating a character that could represent that for us. And so, as I would say, it's not the version in the book, but I would say they have the same rotten soul.
Okay, and again, Eric, if you are smart enough to use this to make fun of feminism, you will get a slow clap from me. If you're just gonna go, ew, my modern day Nazis, you are a twat. Because there are effectively negligible amounts of those.
I thought you had more to say.
And they're almost universally mocked, derided, and made the fuck fun of. As they should be, because they're twats.
Moving on.
Moving on.
Yeah. Earlier this month, Amazon showed off the new version of Stormfront played by Aya Cash in a promotional piece in Entertainment Weekly, which we had just covered before this article. In that promotion piece, Aya Cash detailed that her character is here to blow up Vought. She she adds she's here to try and get Vought back to the original idea behind creating superheroes, and she can be quite the feminist. There's a lot of, I wouldn't say misdirect, but she also is a very empowered woman. Cash elaborates that,
Okay, deja vu.
yeah,
Massive
no,
deja vu.
yeah, it's the same thing from last article. It's what's written here.
Mm-hmm.
Cash elaborated that you start off this season thinking she's one thing and then discover she's another. She added, there are quite a few times where you identify with her as audience member or agree with what she says. I think those are the most dangerous people. The Boys season 2 has not announced a release date. Season 2 did wrap up in November 2019.
Okay, so it is actually filmed, so hypothetically it could still be released in July, because I would imagine most VFX artists and stuff like that can work from home pretty easily.
Yeah. Editors as well.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of Creepy's comics? Are you looking forward to seeing The Boys season 2? No, I am not.
I think that Eric Kripke is being a moron because he has bought the propaganda that there's Nazis on the rise anywhere, basically.
I'll be right back.
When effectively the thing on the rise, if anything, is not white nationalism but civic nationalism, which is basically just countries and the cultures that those countries contain should exist and should be allowed to perpetuate themselves on their own terms, which I can't find anything wrong with particularly. I think there probably is some kind of happy medium between civic nationalism and globalism, but we're never going to get there if we don't at least affirm nations' ability to be like, yeah, we should exist and we shouldn't completely give up our culture because reasons.
Sorry, I was just setting up.
For the
Last night.
deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I have nothing really to say. Again, like I'm not a big fan of the boys. Like I even did some research, like watched some videos, and like looked up stuff.
Yeah, didn't we do a response to that one guy who was talking about the boys?
Savage Books. The boys saving us from superheroes, I believe, or
Yeah,
something
something like that.
where he was just being like a complete like I think you said nihilistic asshole.
Yes,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah, as though we need to be saved from the superhero genre, which is whack.
Uh, oh God, damn. For the record, folks, always make sure to stretch. Otherwise, you'll just wind up with a lot of stiff bones and shit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I got really nothing else to say. Like I said, I'm not big on the boys just because I find it way too cynical and downright just. It's that kind of edgy where it's not. You can't really excuse it.
It's bitter
Yeah.
and whiny.
Yeah, and it's just really not something I like when it comes to superheroes.
Because Brainstormer is too pure for this world.
Eh.
By which I meant that as a compliment, not trying to insult you or anything.
No, I know. I said "and" because I'm not entirely sure I'm that pure. I'm purer than most of the friends I have on this platform. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
No offense.
None taken.
But yeah. So we'll be finishing a video we started last week, which was Renegade Cuts: The Unbearable Emptiness of Sonic the Hedgehog. So again, we are finishing the last half of it because it was like 13 minutes, and we only got through like the first half of it. So if you want to see the first,
And we had to cover the New Warriors trailer last week. We were almost contractually obligated to by the laws of geekdom, so we had to split it.
right? So yeah, again, so if you guys want to see the first half of this video, then you then go to our then go check out
Go to podcast 55. Also, while you're there, you will see our reaction directly to the new Warriors announcement trailer. So if that sounds like something that you might be interested in, please go and check out podcast 55.
It's a really bad trailer.
Yeah, and the sad irony is it didn't have to be.
Yep. Okay, let me. All right. I'll be honest. I think I phased this entire video out of my mind, so I'm kind of coming at it with fresh eyes again.
Which is probably good.
Yeah.
For the sake of entertaining the people.
Yep. I mean, granted, I haven't seen the second half of the video because I always try to make sure I have like genuine reactions when we do this kind of thing.
I didn't rewatch it even though I was going to, so I got sidetracked today talking on the Honey Badger Discord that I am now finally a member of because Allison, in her infinite awesomeness, decided to open it to people who couldn't afford to pay for entry because of how shitty the quarantine and corona mess has been. So yay, Allison.
Mm. Okay. So, like I said, this video is The Unbearable Emptiness of Sonic the Hedgehog by Renegade Cut. And yeah, we're covering the last 6 or so minutes of the video.
6 or so, give or take, yeah.
Yeah. So again, just as a disclaimer, reminder, we covered the first half last week on Podcast of Storm number 55. You want to check that out?
There it is.
Yeah.
And we also covered the new Warriors trailer if you're interested in our thoughts on that.
Okay. So, shall we, Banana?
We shall, Banana.
Obviously not being apolitical at all. After all, Sonic the Hedgehog made nearly $300 million worldwide, whereas Birds of Prey, the so-called political film, only made nearly $200 million worldwide. It only had a mid-sized budget and will definitely earn a profit, but dang, what a turbo-sized bomb, right? In truth, movies that this subculture derides as political, meaning starring women or with diverse casts, often smash box office records.
Oh, for fuck's sake, Leon. It wasn't so-called political. The stars of the goddamn movie were explicitly making political statements about it, about women's empowerment and everyday toxic masculinity.
Right, and not
the
to mention,
perils of misogyny and being a woman and so on and so on.
not to mention the god awful marketing, which basically was saying that it was a truly feminist movie.
Yeah, for fuck's sake, the word emancipation was in the title.
Yeah, so
under its original title, the Birds of Prey and the Fabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. So
fantabulous.
Fantabulous.
Yeah, so also, if you want an actual Birds of Prey movie, go check out the one I like. My Brainstormer Rewrites Birds of Prey video on my channel.
He did that. He did that thing where he takes something completely unsalvageable and fixed it.
Yeah,
he's good at that, and I'm not saying that just because he's my friend.
Yeah. So, and again, it wasn't that the movie starred women or anything, because there have been action movies that have starred women.
Yeah. Ellen Ripley, Sarah Connor, Buffy,
Alice from those Resident Evil movies. I'm aware they're god awful, but she's still a star.
Laura Croft, fuck, even like Katniss Everdeen, Tris Marigold from like basically all of the
what?
young adult YA movies.
You know what? Okay, these aren't movies. This isn't a movie, but these are great characters from I think I've talked about this show, Red vs. Blue. It's like it's the oldest web series on the internet. And you have two characters, badass female characters. Granted, they're more side characters, but they can really be their own main characters of a series. So you have Agent Texas. She's a full metal bitch. I'm not gonna lie.
And in the vein of awesome badass full metal bitches, Margot Hansen from The Magician, stone cold fucking bitch. Still an awesome character.
But speaking of character, with Texas or Tex, she is a tragic character in the sense that she is an AI memory ghost of the former lover of a Dr. Leonard Church. And the AI that was based off of him basically created, annexed that part of himself, of Texas, creating her. And basically she was a reason that kind of started off the whole series, for the whole series to happen. Like all the events that have happened in Red vs. Blue from season 1 to 10. And the thing with Agent Texas, the AI program, because the actual Texas, the Allison, it was her name. She died in her real life, and that was the only thing that director Leonard Church can remember of her. And the AI had this problem that when she ever has a goal or is trying to do something, and when it's right within her reach, no matter how hard she fights or anything, she will always fail because that's what she's based off of.
Mm.
And not to mention that this ties in with the other character, Agent Carolina, who is the daughter of Allison and Dr. Leonard Church.
Mm-hmm.
She was like a top agent for this thing called Project Freelancer.
Mm-hmm.
Like she was a master martial artist, she was a crack shot, she was just badass all around.
Yeah.
But her father, who was director of the project that she worked for, she was constantly competing for his affection and stuff. And when Agent Texas, which was, again, an AI stuffed in a robot, her greatest adversary for her father's love and affection was her own mother.
Ah.
And again, her flaws are pretty also something I can relate to in a way. Granted, I don't think I've ever had this problem myself, but she's very competitive. She's constantly trying to show that she's the best. Again, I feel like that comes from a feeling of inadequacy and something like that. And she becomes so engulfed in trying to win her father's approval that she basically screws over everyone that she called her friends. Basically, people that she could have made a family with instead of her actual family. Like even a man she loved, she threw away because she couldn't see past her own wants.
Yeah, blinded by her one-track goals.
Yeah, tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And it takes all of her friends being violently killed because of the sins of her father and herself and everything to finally realize that she's not like that. That she can't be held on to the past by the past. And there's even like a line she says in the end of season 10 where she wants to go on kind of a redemptive story by trying to track down the remnants of Project Freelancer and stop people from using technology for wrong reasons. The things she helped do, what she was involved with, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but
yeah,
she says, I'll be honest, I don't think we'll ever be able to go back to good. But I think we have a way to try. And sooner or later, well, be better, And sooner or later, we'll find that better is good enough. Yeah, that show got good after season 5. Like, just, god damn. Like, I'll be honest, it's like one of the very few things that have actually made me close to crying.
Which, as any long-term viewer of this show will know, is your basic shit test for quality.
Yep. But my point being is the problem with the characters in Birds of Prey is not because they're female. It's because they're very poorly written or they're written in a way that you just can't. Again, I mentioned in the review for Birds of Prey is that pacing of the movie is too fast.
Yeah. And they're basically propaganda pieces. That's the thing. There is a distinct difference between a female character and a feminist character, because feminism does not have a monopoly on the definition of woman or womanhood or femininity or equality or female empowerment. There are plenty of ways women can find power that have bumfuck nothing to do with the patriarchy or the wage gap or rape culture or emotional labor or historical female oppression or any of the other bullshit axioms upon which feminism is based. but you appear to not be able to tell the difference between a female character and a feminist character, Leon, because to you it seems that any woman who isn't a feminist is being a woman wrong somehow. Just like any gay person who isn't an LGBT activist is being gay wrong somehow. And any black person who doesn't support Black Lives Matter is a coon who's been turned against their own self-interest somehow. And it doesn't appear that you understand what's the fuck wrong with that. You're basically arbitrating over who is and is not a proper member of these demographics.
Yeah, I honestly got nothing else to say about that. Like, just and the whole like money thing. Maybe it's just because there's something more enjoyable with Sonic. Like, it had more fun to it than I think. Where it's trying to be fun, but it's failing.
Also, it's better written, and again, it doesn't try to willfully be divisive. And this is the other problem. You can't try to willfully be divisive and then bitch that your movie is seen as divisive. When you actively try to alienate a certain demographic of people, especially when that demographic of people was up until that point your main demographic for this particular kind of entertainment, you're going to piss people off. Because you're basically telling people who are invested in movies and video games and TV and comics, they shouldn't care about those things, and even more sometimes because of all these toxic fandom narratives, you're saying that it's sinful or wrong to care about these art forms. You're basically saying not only shouldn't you care, fans, about this material, but you're wrong to care about this material. And you find it surprising that in such a situation as that, people get pissed off at you, or rather the people who made Birds of Prey.
Yeah.
I can't tell if you're being willfully disingenuous and strawmanning, or if you're just being that intellectually lazy and incompetent. I'm going with the second option because of Hamlin's razor. I'm going with that option because never attribute to malice what can adequately be expressed by incompetence. So there. You are staggeringly incompetent, but you are not malicious. That is the most charity I can give you at the moment, sir.
Banana?
Banana.
Not that this should be any indicator of the worth of the art, but try telling that to the get woke, go broke YouTubers who never actually do any math or fact checking. There is no quality, only capital. In creating a culture war surrounding Sonic the Hedgehog, this subsection of gamers and bad faith.
Oh yeah, Dom, before you do it, because I know you're going to do a long-winded one.
Mm-hmm.
The whole "get woke, go broke" saying is in an overall sense, right? I don't think it involves like the facts and the math and all of what he's saying, right? Like, it's just a general sense.
Yeah, it's supposed to be sort of a there's a phrase in economics that always stuck with me back when I was taking economics in high school, which is the phrase "all other things being equal." And the thing about "go woke, go broke" is it applies all other things being equal. The few the few examples of your material that you can point to as being successful, Leon, all tend to have extenuating circumstances. Or because you basically strawmanned the point as anything with a woman in it rather than anything with explicit feminism in it, which is the actual point that most people are making, you will take something that is definitively not woke by any organically developed set of criteria, and you will include that as part of your wokeness is successful statistic. And incidentally, yeah, the reason why it matters, why the box office matters, generally speaking, is, once again, all other things being equal with no extenuating circumstances, it is a reflection of the amount of people, roughly speaking, that you were able to engage with your material. And while I agree with I agree with the general sentiment that ad populum is generally pretty shit, there is a fine line between ad populum and meritocracy, i.e., some things are popular because people are stupid, true, but some things are popular because of the quality of that material, because that material was able to draw in more people and therefore more money in a system where people pay for things they like than other material. And especially given the fact that superhero movies are by far and away the predominant genre right now, and almost every comic book movie in this day and age makes more than 200 million. The fact that Birds of Prey could not even cross that threshold does indicate that there is something explicitly wrong with Birds of Prey. And before you come at me with Captain Marvel, remember what I said. All other things being equal versus extenuating circumstances. The extenuating circumstances in the case of Captain Marvel, it came out between Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, which is the largest and most successful escapade in the genre to date. It was going to introduce a new character, Girl, to Avengers Endgame, allegedly according to the marketing, and it was at the peak of the popularity of the Marvel Universe, which basically meant that it was almost doomed to be successful, completely regardless of the actual content of the movie itself or the backlash to the actor in question.
Mm-hmm. And we also reviewed that movie, correct?
We did. It was just lots of I don't even, like, there are no words to describe Captain Marvel. There are only various exasperated noises.
Mm. I had nothing else to say, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And Leon, the notion that there is no quality, there is only capital. I don't know if you're being sarcastic with that, as in you're trying to say what other people would say, or if you're genuinely taking the position that meritocracy is a social construct. But either way, you're a fucking moron. Generally speaking, again, all other things being equal, people pay for things they want, or that they have been convinced to want. And generally speaking, in the realm of art in particular, the thing that differentiates good art from bad art is quality. Now, again, there are cases of ad populum in the art industry. It would be naive to say that there weren't, but the question is, how often are there extenuating circumstances for your counterexamples? And how often are my counterexamples what happens when all other variables are accounted for? And on we move.
Banana.
Banana.
Ne'er-do-wells can turn a mediocre children's movie into a chemical weapon, and by choosing a completely unrelated movie to label as its enemy, the battle feels real and activates a tribal defensive posture. Note, if you liked Sonic the Hedgehog but do not hold these toxic beliefs and
Should I just let him finish the?
Okay, I'm going to assume he gets to the point quickly, so sure, let's let him finish.
Or have no strong opinion about Birds of Prey, relax and breathe, because this isn't about you.
Okay, what about people who, like Sonic the Hedgehog, don't live up to the straw man position that you hold, or that you have thrust upon them, but also hate Birds of Prey? Because I guarantee you, simply by virtue of the lack of success of Birds of Prey and the middling audience and critical responses there too, there will be a significant proportion of those. There are, I'm sure, plenty of feminists who would say that Birds of Prey is shit and is in fact bad representation of their ideology. Are you going to argue with them and say that they are all getting in a tizzy over the fact that it stars a woman? Or are you actually going to look at their arguments? And if you're actually going to look at their arguments, then may I ask, what exactly the fuck is wrong with looking at other varieties of argumentation in regards to this? Because I just explained to you that on average, speaking of someone who has very often in the last few years made quite a thing of being an anti-SJW YouTuber and also being on the left, but never mind that. What I've explained to you, Leon, is that your perception of these people, right, the perception that you have outlined in this video, is majority wrong. Granted, there are some morons, just as there are some morons in literally every possible political position that will hold to this arch right-winger impression that you have. But the vast majority of them just would prefer a world in which politics and philosophizing does not actively impede meritocracy or imply that meritocracy is irrelevant and or a quote-unquote harmful social construct. But because you appear to be one of the people who holds the position that meritocracy is nothing but a harmful social construct, you cannot see anything wrong with this position because you find it to be the objective truth. Granted, it's kind of hilarious that a ideology that literally says objectivity is by definition not objective, and therefore everything is a social construct or a consensus authorization. It's funny that someone who holds that position would defer to something objective, given that your entire ideology basically boils down to nothing is objective, everything is consensus driven, derp.
Also, he's just being a dick.
Yeah, he's being unnecessarily bitter and snarky. Granted, he was always a bit snarky, even in videos that I like of his, but I think that the world not going in the way he wants it to has fucked over his brain.
Mm-hmm.
And he has my sympathies for that, but this has been a long time coming, even back when he made videos that I liked of his. Like, once I described myself as a centrist on Twitter while in the middle of a conversation with Kyle Calgren from Browse Health High. And I meant centrist in the international sense, i.e. in the Bernie Sanders sense of literally every other first world country has, universal health care and the like. I meant I was an international centrist. But Leon saw that I described myself as a centrist, and his response was, ew, the centrist follows me too, and he blocked me. Granted, Kyle, to his credit, later unblocked me and let me have a conversation with him like I wanted to in the first place, to his credit. But Leon, I don't think to this day has ever unblocked me. Granted, if he ever sees the videos we've done in response to him, I wouldn't blame him now. But at the time, I had not done anything wrong. Of course, he had not put things that I would consider to be unreasonably stupid in his videos at that point, and therefore there was no reason to criticize him at that point. But now he definitely has. He has gone far off the reservation into full-on nihilism a few too many times, and so I'm perfectly justified in criticizing him, and therefore I stand by most of what I said in the video responses we've done to him. That being said, if he ever gets off of his self-righteousness kick and seems to become grounded in something resembling rationality again, I have absolutely no personal malice against him. When I insult you for being an idiot, Leon, I'm not directing at you personally. It just so happens that you are the person who is saying the thing I define as idiotic, and therefore you are getting called an idiot. But it has absolutely nothing to do with any malice between us, and it never will. Same thing with Kyle. Am I upset that one of my favorite YouTubers at the time blocked me because he thought I was a Nazi for explaining the Kyrgyzstan joke to him? Sure, but does that change? Well, obviously it changes my opinion of him somewhat, because I used to find that he was rational, and now I'm less inclined to think he's rational. But it still means nothing in the realm of personal, like personal attacking or anything. Anyway, moving on. Banana.
Banana.
Sonic the Hedgehog can certainly be enjoyed without any interest in trashing Birds of Prey, and will predominantly be put in front of the eyeballs of children who have no love for or even knowledge of this toxic discourse. But due to this invented rivalry, it's hard for people to casually announce that they enjoyed Sonic the Hedgehog on social media without being accidentally and unwillingly drafted into this fabricated conflict.
Okay, that was the worst possible place to pause that, because it made it sound like you were saying cunt.
Better?
Yes. I that wasn't on purpose. That was just really, really terrible timing.
Okay.
Okay, but anyway, Leon, let me once again explain to you the origin of this conflict, because it appears to completely have escaped your notice or flown right over your head. I'm not going with the second option because I know you and I know you're smart enough to not let most things over your head when you're actually able to unbiasedly look at them. But the reason why people in the subculture to which you're referring bolstered Sonic and diminished Birds of Prey is Sonic, when it first opened with the trailer that horrified and befuddled 90% of its fan base, and people complained, as people want to do, rather than confect some moralistic, angry sob story about toxic fandom, kind of like you're doing here, but that's neither here nor there. Rather than doing that, the people of the Sonic movie considered the possibility that the people who care about and understand Sonic might actually know something about Sonic that they could avail themselves of. Whereas Birds of Prey actively disdained its original source material for the sake of creating a vehicle that aggrandizes Harley Quinn over the actual Birds of Prey, and does so primarily for the sake of making a broader political and philosophical point about feminist narratives, and basically created a feminist empowerment fantasy that they were selling as a female empowerment fantasy, but as we just went over there, those are two very different things. Because I don't want to shit on your parade too much, Leon, but you are aware that roughly 8% of Americans are feminist, right? And you are also aware that less than 20% of British people are feminist, right? Meaning that at the very least, the staggering majority of women are not feminists. And that's to say nothing of the majority of men. Which means that feminism, even if we were to go simply by the numbers, categorically does not speak for women and shouldn't. And did it ever occur to you that also a large number of people in this subculture to which you are referring are women, are not internalized misogynists, are not internalized misogynists, and hated Birds of Prey because they don't like the feminist pandering that went on in that movie. Because I can point you in several directions of several women who hated that movie for non-misogynistic reasons before you go, they just hate themselves and have Stockholm syndrome and are servants to the patriarchy. Before you go the internalized misogyny route, I can point you in the direction of several female YouTubers on this side of the argument that came up with many, many, many good reasons why Birds of Prey was shit. Just like in recent times when New Warriors came out from Marvel, one of the largest varieties of people who hated the New Warriors were LGBT enthusiasts and or activists because it was terrible representation for them and of their beliefs. And again, that's coming from someone who is bisexual and predominantly prefers men, sexually speaking. But anyway, banana. Unless he left to do a thing. And I shall attempt to do that thing where I fill in the void of dead air with singing because it's better than having dead air. So question, what should I...
How about Michigan Man?
Well, you're back now. I don't have to do that. And also, I don't know that song very well, I don't think.
I'll show it to you sometime later. You were talking for a while, so I figured I'd just get myself a taco.
Ah.
Go ahead.
Obligatory irony of a Hispanic person eating a taco, and moving on.
Excuse you, I'm actually multiracial. Well, granted, I'm predominantly Latino.
Yes,
So.
and I have seen you, and judging by your skin tone, you are more heavily Hispanic than not.
Well, I got the Irish gene for drinking. Granted, I only drink soda, but still, it was alcohol.
Well, yeah, you're also 19, so you don't
20.
20, and you actually respect the legal parameters for drinking. So even if you have the Irish gene for drinking, we won't know until another year. And if at some point in that year we meet up, I am definitely buying you a drink. Or I might just bring a drink to give you, because I do have a very nice bottle of Honey Jack that you might like, actually.
All right, shall we?
We shall. Banana.
Banana.
Flicked. Everything is bad, and the hurting never stops. Sonic the Hedgehog follows the formula of the Masters of the Universe movie and the Beastmaster sequel by taking all the fantastical action of the premise of the intellectual property and shoehorning it into our world. The real world. This gives the movie a lot of fish out of water jokes. Sonic Encino-mans his way through the movie, understanding the world only through non-interactions he has from a distance and from popular culture.
Okay. Again,
Okay.
I think we brought this up last week too.
Yeah.
He is a giant blue talking humanoid hedgehog.
hmm
There,
Also, the creators of this movie were smart enough to make it a prequel to the games and not a direct like rip off of the games in like because some of the worst offenders of the variety he's talking about um Alvin and the Chipmunks movies and the Smurf movies, and Sonic is nowhere near those. And also, by virtue of Sonic's fast-talking nature, they basically managed to make his character almost a PG or almost a kid-friendly version of Deadpool, which gives the movie a lot more comedic cachet. Not to mention, Jim Carrey is Jim carrying the shit out of his role as Dr. Eggman Robotnik.
Mhm. Plus, a lot of characters who live in kind of an isolated life do tend to. I mean, it's kind of a trope in a sense that if there's like a character that lives in kind of isolation that only has like TV and stuff like that,
Yeah.
they kind of base their personality off those.
Yeah, they use their sense of humor and their pop culture savviness to compensate for their social isolation and kind of stuntedness. What goes on to Sonic in this movie is basically a more subtle and more PG oriented version of what happens to the Cable Guy in the movie The Cable Guy, which is probably Jim Carrey's creepiest and saddest movie, even though it is still pretty funny.
Mm-hmm. Sorry,
Moving on.
just need my taco.
Yeah, but
Sonic makes a variety of base pop culture references throughout the movie and substitute for jokes.
Pop quiz, hotshot. You just picked a fight with a poorly disguised hedgehog who's seen way too many action movies. What do you do?
Great. Cringe. The reference jokes were
again, you're free to have a problem with this kind of humor, Leon, but it is perfectly valid humor, and it's basically the PG equivalent of Deadpool.
Yeah.
Granted, you are free to have a problem with that kind of humor, and I get where you're coming from with it, because I don't generally find it very entertaining either. But relative to, say, the Alvin and the Chipmunks movies, or the Smurf movies, or God forbid the Master of the Universe movie, or the Mario Brothers movie, this is fucking gold compared to those movies. But then again, those movies are cinematic abortions, basically.
Mm-hmm. Huh.
But at least he's actually talking about the substance of the movie now, instead of something socio-political context.
Yep.
Banana.
Yes, sir.
dated by the time the movie was released, by the way. It begins with a freeze frame record scratch. Yeah, that's me. Bet you're wondering how I got into this kind of thing, and proceeds with antiquated cracks about hipsters, which I
Okay. First off, the record scratch one, that's just, it's a cliche at this point, but it hasn't lost its.
Yeah. And it's also possible they might have evoked it for the sake of making fun of the cliche, or demonstrating that they're self-aware. which is one of the strengths of this movie. It is far more self-aware than, say, the Alvin and the Chipmunks movies or the Smurf movies, which tend to play these situations as grounded as possible, instead of having any kind of sense of humor about them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, banana or
Banana.
okay. What the hell? Okay, hold on.
Think we're a thing and an easy target for think piece articles 9 years ago? Too old to be a timely joke, not old enough to be a retro joke. It's like the opposite of the Goldilocks zone. Again, that's not all, because the movie also references the video game several times, like Dr. Robotnik having a controller on his hand. Fan service is not respect for the audience.
But it might be respect for the source material, which is, to an extent, respect for the audience, because the audience, at least primarily, cares about the source material, hence why an IP is adapted in the first place.
Yeah. What do you? I know, like the Phase 1 Marvel movies weren't as good, and Dalton disappeared. I will wait for a moment.
Okay, my phone was being dumb again. Anyway, an IP is adapted to make an
Speaking
impact
because
with, and hopefully a profit off of, those who care about and enjoy and consume things related to a given IP.
okay,
And
no, Dalton, you. Okay, question. You you left for a moment. You were gone for a moment, so I don't know.
the last thing he said was references or not respect for the
Yeah,
source material or something like that.
we covered that, and I was saying something, but I can't remember what it is now.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, lost it. Damn. Oh no, I was talking about the Marvel movies, like Captain America: First Avenger, and basically, like for the moments he was doing the shows, right?
Yeah.
Members in that movie where there was like a montage of him like basically trying to raise kind of money for donations for the war effort.
Yeah, he's being the military's like publicity guy and the PR guy.
Yeah. And like he's wearing kind of the classic suit from the comics. I mean, granted,
Star-Spangled Man with a flag, etc. Yeah.
and he also punches Adolf Hitler, like the guy who's like dressed up to be Hitler, to like again for
Which,
propaganda reasons.
which I kind of feel bad for that guy, because no matter how gentle he's trying to be, you're getting fucking punched by Captain America, and that maybe it's just because I'm basically fundamentally made of glass, but that's gonna hurt.
And you do realize it's a stage punch where basically he's like a foot away from him.
Yeah, kind of, but I mean, Cap is huge, and I can't imagine even being barely touched by someone that big is very light.
But it's a nice little callback to fans.
Yeah, the source material.
Yeah, it's
And also the tone of that movie, in the fact that it's basically a pulp, a period piece pulp story, is also sort of a reference for the fans, because of course that's the impetus behind the Captain America mythos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got nothing else to say about that, but like him saying fan service is not respect for the audience is completely not true. Granted, if you only base a movie on fan service,
Well, also you need to understand how to effectively use fan service and what actually qualifies as fan service. You can't just borrow an aesthetic from something and not provide any of the appropriate context for it and call that fan service. Generally speaking, fan service is only bad when it's done wrong. If you're actually translating something from the games into the reality of the movie as a legitimate plot point and or like Easter egg, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like in the movie, Dr. Robotnik uses his finger controllers to control his many robots, like he does in the games, and it also works in the context of in the movie, his robots are basically souped up drones in a modern context. So having sort of gesture-based controls of them, given like modern day technical interfaces, makes perfect sense.
yep.
And also, Leon, while there might be some segments of the audience who don't like fan service, it's just possible that in targeting something to the people who actually like, understand, appreciate, and consume the original source material, they might be creating something that those people will like primarily. And generally speaking, the people you want to enjoy something are your core fan base effectively. In the same way that a political party needs to pander to its base, ideally. Unlike the corporate Democrats, who I think we can both agree fail at every turn to ingratiate their base and in fact actively alienate their base. I'm using this analogy because I know you understand politics much better than you appear to currently understand pop culture. So think of movies and art in general in terms of party loyalties. If you are part of the core of the like Sonic the Hedgehog party, if you will, and that party completely alienates you, you would rightfully be pissed.
Although I
And
could,
in the same vein, people who are the core audience for something are rightfully pissed when people make toxic fandom arguments about them and or directly alienate them. Which is why when people actually listened to the core fan base with Sonic and changed the design, this engendered in that core audience a tremendous amount of goodwill. Especially in contrast to Birds of Prey, which basically used itself as a means to a philosophical and political end to basically be the propaganda arm for feminism rather than tell anything resembling a good story or even provide a decent or entertaining movie.
again,
Which is why the dichotomy between them.
again, if you want a possibility of an actual Birds of Prey movie that was good and not some propaganda, please go check out my other channel, Brainstormer Pop Culture, which has the video Brainstormer Rewrites Birds of Prey.
Mm-hmm. And Banana.
One moment.
It's flattery. We need to stop being so easily impressed that a movie reminded you something exists. Defenders of the non-humor and the rote story will undoubtedly say that this is a kid's movie. But that falls apart when better movies designed for younger audiences are in theaters right now, like Disney Pixar's latest entry, Onward. The bar for a movie being good is not somehow lowered due to the average height of the target audience.
Okay, on that last point, we can entirely agree. Totally 100% on board with that. In my opinion, in fact, the inverse should be the case. If something is targeted for kids, we should try even harder at it because it's their first exposure to what we call arts, and generally speaking, people look back on their childhoods fondly, and we generally speaking want them to look back on their childhoods fondly. Therefore, we need to make sure that their childhoods are filled with as much good and awesome shit as possible.
Right. Can I provide some examples of really great things for kids? With air quotes.
Please. However, before you do that, I'm going to just say, just for the record, Leon, while I agree with sort of the basic point you're making at first there, I do think that in a world where franchises actively alienate their core audiences with narratives about toxic fandom and the like, it is somewhat of a miracle for a movie or show or what have you to bother to ingratiate themselves, or at least try to ingratiate themselves to said fan base. Which again is why Sonic was as successful as it was, because rather than spinning a narrative about entitled toxic fans, they considered that the people who like Sonic the most and know the most about Sonic might actually know shit about the area of expertise they have chosen to inculcate themselves into. And I do agree that Onward is awesome. Let's not be too hard on him there. Like, Onward is genuinely kind of awesome as a movie, and it is one of my favorite Pixar movies, actually. It's not the greatest Pixar movie, but it is awesome.
I think you like it because it has magic in it.
Well, not only that it has magic in it, because there's plenty of bad things that have magic in it, but it does at least attempt to be respectful to magic as a concept. So, yay. But
Okay,
anyway, say your thing.
So I'm going to just mention 2 movies and 2 shows, just because I feel like that's kind of needed. So the first movie is a Disney movie. Granted, I like it because it veers a lot differently from the typical Disney movies. Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like, I think it was kind of like one of the first Disney movies I ever saw, and
Interesting.
And it's it has for one thing, it's beautifully made, and it also teaches theme. It has themes themes of like forgiveness and corruption of power, and generally just looking at people for who they are and not what they are.
And also an interesting sort of reflection on history, in that it very much does at least try to portray what the upper echelons of the church were like at the time it's set, which is the mid to late 1700s, if I remember correctly. Also, right. Hellfire is amazing.
Yep. And a current movie that I had seen recently, which was Into the Spider-Verse. Well, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that was for kids, and again, air quotes.
Yeah.
Where
generally speaking, something that is for kids should be enjoyable by as many people as possible.
Yeah. It goes, Miles Morales, who's the main character of the story, goes on a journey of realizing what Spider-Man stood for, and just sees all these other spider people, and he knows, like, he comes to the realization that he can't just be a Spider-Man. He has to be his Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it's fun, and it has this optimism to it that I really like. And Avatar: The Last Airbender, not the movie, the show, which we talked about earlier,
mm-hmm.
for kids, again, air quotes.
Hmm.
It's dark, you know.
Yeah.
And it deals with so much things in like its 3 seasons. And honestly, and I'm gonna be completely honest, I didn't that its sequel series, Korra.
Yeah, Korra sucks, kind of.
It wasn't like super bad, but
Well, no, not relative to every other show, but relative to this is what they chose to follow up Avatar: The Last Airbender, one of the greatest Western shows ever made.
yeah,
You know,
I
in
think,
animation or for children
I think on its
as
own,
target audience.
yeah, I think on its own it could be fine. But I think since it's
Yeah.
I
It's kind of like how Castlevania season 2 was really, really good, but compared to Castlevania season 1, I find it disappointing.
yeah, and the other one, uh, I had another TV show, but I lost you for a second. Also, Ed Brewer says, "Yo, what up, Ed?"
Hello, Ed.
Um, hmm. I don't know. I lost the idea. I lost what I was going to say for the second TV show. That was
Well, I have one as an example of something that's targeted to children that is awesome for basically everyone. That would be Disney's Gargoyles. I will continue to sing the praises of Gargoyles, in particular Gargoyles season 2, because season 1 was a bit formulaic, but season 2, after they introduced sort of the broader Gargoyles mythology, seriously great fucking television there.
hmm. I think I was gonna pick an anime, but I think anime just has like this really broad thing that it can never really be
Well,
tied down to.
true, but I mean, you could pick something out of like the shonen subgenre of anime, but fortunately, Japan seems to be red pilled on the for kids versus for everyone question, and therefore most everybody in Japan enjoys some variety of shonen or other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to like think of a Western cartoon that's for kids that isn't like a really popular one. I'm trying to like think of a more obscure one.
Yeah, it's hard to and even the ones that weren't popular at the time they were made, like Invader Zim, have developed straight up cult classics phenomenon. So
And that show, honestly, that show was just like edgy in a sense that it was just fucking weird.
yeah, in a world that made sense, that show would have gone on for 10 seasons.
I'll be honest, I think that show kind of gave me nightmares when I would watch it as a kid.
Like I said, there were things when I was a kid that gave me nightmares too. So it's
Yeah.
not like I'm gonna mock you for finding Invader Zim creep. Hell, like I said,
Mm,
the Puppet Master episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender genuinely creeped me the fuck out
yeah.
as a kid.
Yeah, I want to mention Clone Wars, but
Well, I mean, it counts, yeah.
I don't know.
Though I can't speak for the current season, because the current season is new and I don't have Disney Plus.
Yeah. Either way, just
Yeah.
Ed Brewer says Keith David was talking about rebooting Gargoyles.
For the love of God, no. Continuation, yes, please, but rebooting, absolutely bumfucking not. Not in the current zeitgeist. And if there's like a transhuman gargoyle, I'm going to vomit.
Technically,
Also, we need to get the cast of Star Trek: The Next Generation to be voice cast again.
right.
Because I want to see Puck again, voiced by Data, because reasons.
Technically, didn't they have transhuman gargoyles in the original show, like with the experiments by Xanatos, like humans that were mutated into gargoyles, or like
Kind of, but let's be honest, if they tried that today, it wouldn't involve any actual physical changes. It would just be because they identified, and there would be some magical MacGuffin that physically changed them every time they identified as a gargoyle or some shit. Although, if they wanted to mock that sort of mentality, I could see a hilarious episode where like Puck pulls a trick on some people, where like every time they think they're gargoyles, they turn into them, and every time they think they're humans, they turn back into them. Because there was actually a episode, I think it was the first episode that featured Puck, where he tricked Demona into wishing for Eliza to be banished away, but instead of actually killing her or making her disappear, he got rid of her human side by turning her into a gargoyle. And then when she bitched at him for that, he retaliated by turning every single human into a gargoyle on Manhattan or in New York, and turning every single gargoyle in New York into a human. And then when she, at the end, wished that she could go about during the day, he turned her into a human by day because he didn't like her. And Puck is going to Puck, unfortunately. That's just how that works.
okay. So we've been out of this.
We shall banana it. Yes,
Banana.
banana.
Last year saw the release of Klaus, Missing Link, The Lego Movie 2, not to mention live-action fare like The Kid Who Would Be King. A movie being aimed at younger audiences is not somehow immune to criticism. If anything, movies aimed at younger audiences have an even greater responsibility to not be garbage, for the same reason that every other product for children requires greater scrutiny.
Agreed. Totally agreed.
I think in this context, I can't agree with. In his context, I can't agree with him. But overall, yes, I do agree.
like if you take in the context of everything else he said, I'm sure he means it needs to have the appropriate political and socio-political messaging, but allowing for the possibility that he may, compartmentalize his opinions more than that. I like I said, I have absolutely no problem with this. It is literally pretty much exactly what I said in regards to this point. And it is by far the most sensible thing he has said thus far, even if you can't agree with it in context.
Yeah. I just remembered the cartoon I was thinking of. It's Tron Uprising, and I've talked about that show a lot.
Yeah, aside from the first Tron, the second Tron was bad, so I never got the chance. I never really took the chance to watch the animated series.
It was good. Like, it's a prequel to the sequel.
Okay, so it's stuck in between the first one and the second one. Okay.
It's good though. Like, it's really good. Like,
Hmm.
and of course, though, Disney had to fuck it over.
Well, yeah, because Disney is wont to do that, unfortunately. Just like they had to cancel Spectacular Spider-Man in favor of Ultimate Spider-Man because the world is not fair.
Spectacular Spider-Man.
That was such a great show.
Yeah, and you hate Spider-Man. Well, not hate, but it's not your favorite.
I actively don't give a fuck about Spider-Man, generally speaking. Yeah, but that show was genuinely awesome.
Yeah.
And
Well,
their version of Flash Thompson was cute, although most versions of Flash Thompson are cute, to be honest.
don't
But
keep it in your pants.
sorry.
I honestly thought you were going to mention something about character, which would have been my stick, but
No, just remarking on underneath all his bullyish bravado, Flash Thompson is genuinely kind of cute. And I want so few things in a potential significant other.
okay. Banana.
Banana.
Scott Tafoya from Consequence of Sound put it best. I didn't laugh, but maybe I'm not the target audience for the thing. Who the target audience is, I couldn't tell you with a gun to my head. The school group I was told would be watching this flop sweat-soaked trifle is mostly 12-year-olds from the looks of them. They laugh as a group 3 times. I counted. One of them laughed at one sight gag by himself.
For the record, humor is subjective.
And even if we don't want to allow for that because willful subjectivity is cancer, it's possible that they are not actually entirely the target audience, and also it's possible that because of the lowbrow nature of the humor, even kids don't laugh at it. However, it is also possible that the parts of the movie that stuck with them are not the fast-paced humor parts, but the actual attempts at emotional connection, which I could genuinely see being interesting for a kid. Also, lest we forget that professional critics are almost pathologically cynical about basically everything. So
That's why I don't really trust many critics.
So let's take their opinions with a grain of salt. And also, who knows what this guy defines as laughter? He might only define like uproarious belly laughter as laughter. So there might have been plenty of scenes that made kids smirk or chuckle that he didn't pay attention to. Or it might have just been that they were so engrossed in the movie that they didn't outwardly laugh, which is also possible. If you're genuinely paying attention to something, a lot of the time you'll laugh internally rather than externally. Anyway, banana.
Banana.
That's it. They quietly talked amongst themselves the rest of the time. What a school is doing taking kids to see a movie based on a video game when they all own cell phones, couldn't tell you. But I'm guessing they enjoyed not being in class even though they clearly didn't enjoy the movie. They all cheered like hell during the post-credit scene when Sonic's sidekick Tails showed up. I couldn't believe it. They snored their way through the first movie and then cheered like zealots when they were threatened with another one.
Yes, because as you just outlined, Leon, people who like
that's not Leon. He's reading it, but it's
yeah, I know, but he's agreeing with this, so I'm assuming he at least tacitly agrees with it. Yeah, as you just implied, Leon, throughout this entire video, what people like about a given IP is the IP. So it's possible that many of the kids who went to see the Sonic movie wanted a more Sonic-y Sonic movie, and therefore when the movie started to be more akin to genuine Sonicdom, they were excited. And just for the record to the pompous critic who wrote this, did it ever occur to you that in a world where everyone has access to consumer technology, there's a greater propensity for breeding of nerds, and therefore it's entirely possible that they might like Sonic, which would be consistent with the cheering at the end, because they actually wanted to see more of the actual, substantive game lore in the movie. The few that, cared about it.
This actually brings up an interesting question for myself, actually. Does anyone want me to try and make a pitch video for a Sonic movie, either as a rewrite or pitch the second movie or something?
Yeah, you should start working on it now, and then by the time it comes time for Sonic 2, which I hope they do make, it'll be ready to come out. But yeah, if anything, the discordant cheers at the end, in contrast to this guy saying they didn't pay attention to the rest of the movie, might imply that the reason why they didn't pay attention was because it wasn't Sonic-y enough. And it also, just throwing this out there, the reason why you didn't see more than 3 major laughs, critic person whose name I don't remember, might be because, as you yourself point out, they were talking to each other throughout the rest of the movie. Therefore, they might not have seen some of the things that might have made them laugh. But as we can see by the end of the movie, they clearly cared enough about the source material to A, recognize Tails, and B, care about his appearance at the end, and presumably also the evolution of Dr. Eggman Robotnik into his proper game counterpart, and getting stuck on Sonic's world, roughly speaking. Yeah, it's all in your own account of events there, Mr. Critic, who presumably Leon agrees with. So you should do better at connecting your own dots, or at the very least, don't present the dots that you refuse to connect if you don't want us to connect them. Because it's your job to think, and I shouldn't have to do your job better than you, but here we are.
Yes.
Yeah, banana.
It may happen too, even if the box office isn't rousing. You're still going to die. The movie attempts to inject some heart into the film, such as in this touching moment when Sonic nearly dies, and Tom rushes to save him and parks his truck in such a way to make sure the Toyota Tacoma brand is facing directly toward the camera like a Coca-Cola bottle on American Idol.
Yeah, we've established you don't like product placement. Moving on.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say I don't really think there's any good way to do product placement.
I don't mind product placement because it sort of reminds you that it takes place in the world. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's more of I don't like a Michael Bay product placement.
Well, yeah, but there's entire libraries that can be and have been written about everything wrong with Michael Bay movies.
True. All right. Banana.
Banana.
There's something about the Sonic the Hedgehog movie that makes me feel a little bit sad when I watch it. And since I decided to make a video about it, that means I've watched it multiple times now. The crass, unceasing product placement reminds me too much of the economic system and culture that prizes profit over humanity, and that was responsible for the demise of the VFX house that made the titular character.
The second part of that is rather sad, Leon, because this means that despite being one of the few VFX houses who actually listen to their consumers over the overpaid corporate hacks who are put in charge of understanding something they don't bother understanding at all. But as far as it reminds you that capitalism exists, I'm sorry, but that is very much a you problem, and you need to get over it at some point. Because even speaking as a social democrat, which I am, capitalism is generally speaking a good thing. There's arguments to be made for regulating it and for subsuming it to the common good and for not allowing it to run rampant with child labor and all that shit. But generally speaking, some variation of capitalism, mixed though it may be, is a good thing, and generally speaking will emerge basically in all circumstances because it just appears to jive with the self-interest of humanity and, generally speaking, human nature. And if you're going to blame capitalism for everything it's done wrong, then can you at least acknowledge that capitalism has also done good things? Because all of the good things about, consumer culture that you're thinking of are also at least tangentially the result of capitalism, just as, corporate sweatshops in the third world might be negative implications of capitalism and so forth. But yeah, for the most part, you projecting a message of capitalism onto this movie is very much your problem. Because it's basically just projecting an image of something resembling the world, and you're hyper-focusing on the part of the world that is capitalistic, which you very much inflicted upon yourself for no good reason other than the fact that you can't unsee the influence of capitalism even if you try. Banana.
Well, Ed Brewer says, and I guess this was our talk about product placement. If it is in place of commercials, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I generally agree with that as well. I think it's a much more subtle and substantive version of advertising than a 2-minute commercial every 5 goddamn minutes.
Okay. Let me pull up the tabs. Just wait. Ed Brewer says capitalism and innovation go hand in hand.
And
Yeah.
again, there is an argument to be made for regulating and or mixing it with other systems, but a world in which consumer goods, for example, are left to government intervention or some other system is a world in which those consumer goods will inevitably be shit. And because art, for better or worse, is a consumer good and should be, you're always going to need to contrive art together with capitalism somehow. That doesn't mean the art in question has to be pro-capitalism, but it does mean that you have to deal with the fact that art exists in a marketplace and therefore needs to bow to market whims to an extent. And if fewer people are anti-capitalist inclined, I don't want to speculate about what your preferred method of like government and economics would be, Leon, because I feel like any way I go will be uncharitable, but you've expressed direct anti-capitalism, so I can safely say that. But yeah, there are fewer people who want anti-capitalist messages and or don't mind just neutral to capitalism messages, so people aren't going to put in the effort, generally speaking. If you want anti-capitalist movies, there are plenty of them because Hollywood is a bit of a left bubble, and that's even to the left of me on most things. Because, like I said, Bernie supporter whose second choices were Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang. But yeah, there's plenty of movies that trap on capitalism, but unfortunately they also have to exist in a civilization. And anti-capitalism, not so good at maintaining civilization. Mixing things with capitalism, generally pretty good at sustaining civilization. Pure unfettered capitalism by itself, kind of terrible at maintaining civilization. But somewhere in the middle
Awesome.
there's a happy medium.
Are you good?
Yeah.
Okay.
The movie reminds me of diminishing union power. The movie reminds me of the ever-growing disparity between the rich and everyone else. Not to mention, literally everything else that's happening right now, including but not limited to a global pandemic whose eventual cure will almost certainly not be provided for free for poor people. At least not in my country.
Again, I agree with you on the basic gist of healthcare should be universal.
He's projecting and being a twat.
Yeah, that is the thing. Despite that, I do agree with you that some kind of single payer system for healthcare would be a good idea. You are jamming it into this movie with a crowbar where it absolutely bumfuck does not belong. Banana.
Free testing, perhaps. Free treatment, highly unlikely. And if your response to all of this is, hey, it's just a movie, then please recognize that your complaint about the complaint can also be hand-waved with the same meaningless, empty phrase. Even if you think Sonic the Hedgehog exists in a vacuum, which it most certainly does not, its constant name-checking of corporate brands snaps us back to reality.
Okay. Leon, Renegade Cut, you are just a... You know what?
Yeah.
No, I don't care. I don't care about not being polite anymore. Honestly, he's annoyed me to an extent that I don't care. You are
Okay.
an absolute thundering dumbass who has projected too much of this fucking movie. And
I'm not saying it's just a movie, and I'm not saying it exists in a vacuum. So you can take your straw manning and shove it promptly up your ass. But that being said, there is a line where the subject matter you are projecting onto this movie are categorically nowhere to be found in this movie. And generally speaking, people tend to like brands because they like the products and or stances that those corporations take on certain issues. I.e., people like Starbucks because they like feeling vaguely intellectual, which is the brand of Starbucks. And they also really like the coffee from Starbucks. Therefore, they have a positive opinion of the brand because the brand provides the product and the atmosphere in which the product is consumed that they also possibly like. It's no big mystery. It's just people acting in their bargain basement self-interest, which is not derived from selfishness necessarily, but simply derived from people's tendency to like to enjoy things. Banana. For the love of God.
don't worry, we're in the end game.
Does that mean I'm going to be disappearing anytime now?
It can't be escapism if we can't escape.
We have no words.
Nobody asked for escapism. That is a confection of your own mind. Please deal with it.
Ed Brewer says, hey, it's just a movie. I always say, like, just take it at face value, and then if you start thinking about deeper things, fine.
I mean, I'm not sure I'm willing to concede to either of those, because there is more to art than just its thinnest possible interpretations and whatnot, but there is a degree to which the question becomes, is the perspective you're infringing onto the movie organic to the movie, or are you putting more of yourself into the movie and less of the movie into the movie? And I think Leon well and truly crossed that line and is now looking at it in the rearview mirror like the fucking Mason-Dixon line.
Okay, so that was kind of it for us because it's good we finished that and finished everything we weren't able to finish due last week.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Do it before midnight this time.
yeah.
By 10
So
minutes, but still.
right. Right. Comic recommendations.
I mean, there are Sonic comics that are supposedly pretty good, and I've seen Linkara do reviews of them, and I generally speaking like him, although he can occasionally go a little bit off the reservation too sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I've been trying to read more comics since I've been since I've been
Quarantine.
since I've been kind of in my house for the last 2 weeks. Granted, I've been lazy and haven't read as much as I probably should have. But I've been reading.
You've got nothing but time now, so you'll get there.
So I have the first volume of Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol. Read the first issue of, the first chapter, I suppose. And I like it. Like, off the bat, it really gets you invested in pretty much every character.
Mm.
Well, the Doom Patrol, not exactly like the Chief or anything, because he's kind of a dick.
But yeah, Grant Morrison is one of the greats in comics still working today.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's never done a bad story, but most of the time, if it's a Grant Morrison story, you're gonna get something at least good, if not bordering on great, most of the time.
And if I remember correctly, most of Grant Morrison's storyline has been adapted into
the show.
Into the Doom Patrol show on DC Universe. And one of the scenes, which is I guess in the first issue of the run, from like from the pilot episode, where Cliff meets Crazy Jane.
Mm-hmm.
She, it's the scene where, I mean, granted, it's a different setting and stuff, but it's still the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's where like the storm starts to happen when Jane's peeing outside and Robot Man's staying like right there with her.
Mm.
And it's just like a couple panels, and Robot Man like takes her hand and says, "Come in out of the rain."
Mm.
And just, God damn, does it hit my heart. Whatever black little shriveled up thing that is in my chest.
Oh, you have a much bigger heart than you think.
I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, Ed Brewer says Doom Patrol, the show, is as weird as the books. Yeah. I would agree with that, even though, like I said, I've only read the first issue of it.
Yeah, amen, and that is what makes Doom Patrol fucking awesome.
Yeah, he says that's a good thing. Yeah, no, it is. And somehow, even though it is weird, it still hits this kind of grounded level with the characters, like their issues and problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it hits me on a very emotional level. I can't exactly explain it. It's more like felt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much.
If you like Doom Patrol, then you definitely need to read his run of Animal Man, because Grant Morrison's run of Animal Man is one of the underrated greats of comicdom.
I haven't read it, and I've heard good things about it, but Gerard Way, who sang for My Chemical Romance. he's a comic writer too, and wrote The Umbrella Academy, and also wrote a little bit of Doom Patrol himself.
Mm-hmm.
I've read his Umbrella Academy. Like, I've read all of it so far.
Mm.
That's good. I like that. Recommend that too.
Have you gotten a chance to check out the show yet?
I have not. It's on my list on Netflix.
You really should check it out. It's awesome.
That's pretty much all I can recommend. Like, because like I said, I've been kind of lazy for a
Yeah.
while.
I'm just gonna recommend the Dresden Files again because for those that don't know, the next book in the series, Peace Talks, and its follow-up, Battleground, got announced recently, and the trailer came out last week. So I am super excited, and this is coming from a guy who read basically the first 12 Dresden Files novels in the space of a month. So yeah, Dresden Files is fucking awesome, and everyone should read it. Everyone.
Yeah. So with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Shalom. Now fuck off, all of you.